It's going now. So give me 1 second for this to get started.
Okay, there it goes.
All right, you guys are good to go. All loss will be at 12:57. Have a good round.
Okay. All right. Next case on the docket for the Circuit Court of Midlands is Joey Petrillo as Administrator of the Estate of Genesis Petrillo versus Harper Martini and Pony Estates. We will start with introductions and taking up any housekeeping matters before trial. I will hear from the plaintiff's side first.
Thank you, Your Honor. May the plaintiff make appearances.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
The plaintiff would like to make appearances at this time.
Okay, you may proceed.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Kathleen Skura, and I'm joined today by my co-counselors, Ms. Shelby Johnson.
Good morning, Your Honor.
And Mr. Krishna Kanduri.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Together, we're advocating on behalf of the plaintiff in today's case, the estate of Genesis Petrillo.
And is the plaintiff pursuing a cause of battery, or will the plaintiff be pursuing a cause of negligence per se?
We are pursuing the cause of negligence per se, Your Honor.
Okay. I will hear from the defense side, and then we will come back for any housekeeping matters you might have to take up.
Thank you.
Good morning, Your Honor. The defense would also like to make appearances. My name is Sydney Plant, and my co-counsel, Lucas Lateral.
Morning, Your Honor.
And David Menicini.
Morning, Your Honor.
We are representing the defendant, Peony Estates, in today's case.
Now, from the plaintiff's side, are there any housekeeping matters we need to address before beginning trial?
Indeed, there are. Thank you, sir. First, we would like to ask if you would prefer that we request permission prior to displaying any exhibits or demonstratives for yourself and defense counsel.
I would just ask that you go through the normal procedures for authentication, but other than that, there's no need to ask permission.
Very well. May we presume that the exhibits are constructively displayed out of the visibility of the jury until entered into evidence?
You may.
And Your Honor, may we also presume that all objections and subsequent arguments are constructively heard outside the earshot of the jury?
Yes, you may assume for the purposes of this round that all objections are outside the presence of the jury.
Additionally, we'd like to verify that you've been provided with the bench book, which contains the rules of evidence, complaints, answers, stipulations, case law, all pretrial orders, all of which has been provided to opposing counsel.
I have seen a copy of the bench book, and I'm looking at it now. Thank you.
At this time, we would invoke Rule 615, constructively sequestering all witnesses, save for party representatives. As the plaintiff, we have no party representatives.
Okay. Does the defense have any issues with that?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. All witnesses will be constructively sequestered under Rule 615.
Thank you. In addition, we'd like to invoke Rule 603. All witnesses are pre-sworn before trial.
Okay. We will assume that all witnesses have been pre-sworn under 603 as well.
Now, with respect to negligence per se, Your Honor, I'd like to call your attention to the September 30th pretrial order, specifically Section 3 on vicarious liability. This is where the defendant, Peony Estates, is held vicariously liable for the actions of Harper Martini, Austin Lewis, and all employees of Peony Estates.
Okay, I'm looking at it now. Okay. I apologize. For what reason do we need to look at this?
Because our case,
theory.
yes, our case theory includes the fact that those people their acts and omissions were part of the.
Okay. Thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Thank you. I'd also like to draw your attention to relevant Midlands case law, specifically Wander v. Conforth, on which the court ruled on the elements of negligence per se. It has already been stipulated by both sides that elements 2 and 4 have been met. So in contention today are elements 1 and 3, that the defendant violated DHES Safety Statute 12100, and the defendant's acts or omissions caused the type of harm that the statute was intended to prevent.
Okay, we will assume that 2 and 4 have been met and that 1 and 3 are in conflict for today's trial.
Yes,
Okay.
sir. Lastly, I'd like to draw your attention, please, to the Kaplan v. Sikora case, which states that pursuant to Rule 801 D2D in the Rules of Evidence, the statement that would otherwise be hearsay is admissible against a party if the declarant is the party's agent or employee, if the statement concerns a matter which is within the scope of that agent or employee relationship, and that the statement was made at such time that the agent or employee relationship existed.
Okay. Noted.
Thank you. And with that, Your Honor, the plaintiff is ready to proceed.
Okay. Does the defense have any additional pretrial matters that they would like to take up before proceeding?
Your Honor, I would just like to mention that the defense does not have a party representative in today's case, but with that, the defense is ready to proceed.
Okay. All right. At this time, we will move into opening statements. The plaintiff may proceed when ready.
Good morning, Your Honor. May it please the court. Another year, another inspection, another excuse. Members of the jury, today we're here to discuss what happens when a business fails to follow precaution. Today, you'll hear about a local winery in Midlands called Peony Estates, the defendant in today's case. Peony Estates is owned by Ms. Harper Martini, and it harvests grapes and produces wine, all while functioning as a bed and breakfast. You'll hear that Peony Estates encountered numerous pest control issues throughout the years, with staggering losses in profit. But the state of Midlands has set rules and regulations for pest control. Statute 12100 protects consumers from the contamination of food and drink by pesticides. But you'll see that for years, Peony Estates repeatedly failed to follow such guidelines. Pesticides were found both inside the production facility and inside the kitchen. Peony Estates failed numerous health inspections because they never properly addressed issues as they arose. And unfortunately for the public, the issue got out of hand. Today, you'll hear about a young woman named Genesis Petrillo, a woman who didn't get to walk down the aisle after drinking a bottle of Peony Estates' wine at her rehearsal dinner on the night of June 7th, 2019. A woman whose life was ended as a result of Peony Estates' failure to follow precaution. Testimony will reveal that the safety hazards within Peony Estates were a pattern that began in 2016, 3 years before Ms. Petrillo's death. You're going to see how the years of constant mismanagement led to the mix of wine with pesticides and the loss of a young woman's life. There are precautions. There are preventable measures established to prevent such harm from coming to consumers. A winery is supposed to provide a customer with an enjoyable experience free of doubt about safety. It was Peony Estates' responsibility to carry out those measures. And had they done so, Genesis Petrillo would still be here with us today. Excuse me. Today we will show you this, we will preview this through the testimony of 3 witnesses. First, you're going to hear from Mr. Danny Francasio, Ms. Martini's former employer. Danny Francasio will walk you through his and Martini's history together. And he'll talk about the multiple times Ms. Martini approached him asking for advice about the out-of-control pest infestation at Peony Estates. Next, you'll hear from Ms. Lonnie Paris, a local journalist. She'll inform you about her investigation into Peony Estates' mishandling of pesticides. And she'll explain to you the winery's pattern of improperly storing pesticides near their products. Finally, you'll hear from Inspector Riley Atkins O'Keefe, a health inspector here in Rapid River Valley. He'll walk you through his inspection of Peony Estates, and he'll inform you about the health code violations with which he cited the winery. Members of the jury, today we bear the burden of proof. We must prove by a preponderance of evidence that the defendant violated the safety statute 12100, that the defendant's acts and/or omissions caused the harm that the statute was meant to prevent, and that the defendant's actions were both the direct and proximate cause for the plaintiff's harm. Members of the jury, throughout today's trial, I want you to keep that phrase in mind: direct and proximate harm. Direct and proximate cause, excuse me. That means that, but for Peony Estates' actions, Genesis Petrillo would still be here with us today. The testimony will prove that Peony Estates violated the Midland Safety Statute, and that failure resulted in Ms. Petrillo's death, a tragically preventable death. The evidence presented today will show you that the defendant was knowledgeable about the safety regulations, yet chose to improperly handle and store pesticides. Members of the jury, today's testimony will show you that another year, another inspection, and another excuse led to the negligent practices by Peony Estates that killed Genesis Petrillo. And at the end of today's case, my co-counselor, Krishna Kandri, will come before you, and he will ask you to find Peony Estates liable for negligence per se. Thank you.
Does the defense wish to make an opening statement at this time?
Yes, Your Honor.
May I proceed when ready?
May it please the court, Your Honor, opposing counsel, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Careful business owner, competitive winery, convenient target. Mr. Martini is a father and the owner of Peony Estates, has always shown an unapologetic love for the business he built from scratch and the son that he raised. For Mr. Martini, this wedding represented an incredibly proud moment. It represented a celebration of the hard work he'd put into the winery that he built from himself and the son that he had raised. You see, since 2012, Mr. Martini had been working in the wine industry, starting in the cellars of another local winery, Rosie and Pedro, where he made a meteoric rise for his commitment to his work. During this time, he learned how to run a winery and how to keep it clean and safe from pests, a common problem for all wineries. From there, he started Peony Estates, his own winery, in 2015. Mr. Martini brought that same commitment to excellence and safety to Peony Estates, and because of it, it grew incredibly successful. And Mr. Martini was incredibly proud to showcase this success at his own son's wedding. Unfortunately, a terrible tragedy later passed. Mr. Petrillo, Mrs. Petrillo, the bride, passed away. But now, the plaintiff is using Mr. Martini's own business as a convenient explanation for this tragedy. Today, the plaintiff is accusing Peony Estates of committing negligence per se. Now, according to Wandro v. Cornforth, they must prove several elements. First, they must prove that Peony Estates violated a statute, particularly a safety statute. Secondly, they must prove that harm was caused because of Peony Estates' action or failure to act. Lastly, they must prove that the plaintiff is a member of the statute's protected class. Now, this last element is not in dispute, as both sides agree that Mr. Petrillo was part of that protected class. So this means that the plaintiffs must prove that Peony Estates violated the safety statute, and that said violation caused Ms. Petrillo's death. And they must prove these three elements to you by a preponderance of the evidence. This means that by the end of the trial, they must have proven that the aforementioned elements are more likely to be true than false. They will be unable to do so. Not only does the plaintiff lack evidence of these specific elements, the defense has provided 3 witnesses that can refute each element of negligence per se. First, you'll hear from Austin Lewis, an employee of Pena Estates who oversaw every step of the winemaking process. He will give you a first-hand account of the safety measures in place at Pena Estates and how they were followed. He'll also tell you about their past difficulties and the meticulous steps they took to address them. Mr. Lewis will show that Pena Estates did not violate any safety statutes. You'll also hear from Blair Osborne, the wedding planner who worked closely with Pena Estates for the wedding and for many events in the past. Mr. Osborne will attest to Pena Estates' reputation and to his personal experience with them. Finally, you'll hear from Dr. R. Cannon. Dr. Cannon is an expert in the fields of pharmacology and toxicology. She'll tell you that the ruling on Ms. Petrilla's death was far from certain. In fact, she'll give 4 alternate explanations that she believes the initial doctor that reviewed Ms. Petrilla missed. Particularly, she'll discuss 4 other possible outcomes: alcohol poisoning, a potential allergic reaction, hepatic disease, or pesticide poisoning from an alternative source. Dr. Cannon will prove to you that Dr. Kwan's judgment of Ms. Petrilla's death was rushed, that we may never know how Ms. Petrilla truly died. Now, today's case is undoubtedly a tragedy, but the plaintiff is looking for the convenient answer. Mr. Martini wanted nothing but the happiness of his son and the success of his business. And since this tragic event has occurred, he has seen nothing but pain. The son that he cares so much has left him in heartbreak, and the heart and reputation of his business has been destroyed. And by the end of trial today, you'll understand that Pena Estates meticulously followed their safety procedures. You'll know that Mr. Martini ran his business passionately and safely. And you'll find that Mr. Martini and Pena Estates are simply the convenient answer to a tragic problem. That's why at the end of trial today, my co-counsel Lucas Lateral will come before you and ask you to find Pena Estates not guilty of negligence per se. Thank you.
All right. At this time, the plaintiff may call their first witness.
At this time, plaintiff calls Danny Francazio to the stand. Good morning. Could you please introduce yourself to the court?
My name is Danny Francazio. I'm 39 years old, a diehard Patriots fan, and I own the best and largest winery estate in Midlands.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the winery that you own?
Sure. It's called Rosie and Pedro's, which I named after my 2 rescue dogs. I've been in the wine game for the past 15 years. I have a BS in biology and an MBA from Duke, so I basically turn my grapes to gold.
Mr. Francazio, how are you involved in today's case?
Well, to put it simply, I know Harper Martini.
And what was your relationship like with Miss Martini?
Harper used to work for me. I initially hired her as a cellar hand, but she was promoted after my 2 other managers had to leave. This was also when I met her son, Casey, who I'm very fond of. They were both like family to me before she went off to open her own winery. But business is business, so I never really held a grudge. Kind of like when Tom Brady left us to sign with Tampa Bay this last spring.
You said that Miss Martini started for you as a cellar hand. What were her responsibilities during that time?
One of Harper's responsibilities was making sure that the cellar was clean and making sure that the area was clear of any pests. If she did notice any, she was to report to me so that we could seal the barrels, move them, and then use the pesticides.
How would you describe Miss Martini as an employee?
At first, I thought she was great, but now I think that most of the credit for her work goes to her managers, not her.
And why would you say that?
Well, just 2 years after opening her own winery, Harper sent me some pretty concerning emails that worried me.
Would you recognize a copy of these emails if I were to show you them in court today?
Absolutely.
At this time, plaintiff asks co-counsel to bring up Exhibit 14. Mr. Francosio, do you recognize this exhibit? Oh, if you could scroll down. Yes.
I do.
And does it look like a fair and accurate representation of these emails?
Yes, it does.
At this time, the plaintiff offers Exhibit 14 into evidence. Now, you mentioned that these, pardon?
I apologize. Does the defense have any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. Objection to character evidence.
Okay. Do you wish to elaborate?
The counsel is trying to use these past emails to show action and conformity therewith. Emails from 2016 have nothing to do with the case in question today, as any practices from the past actions do not relate to this case.
Does the plaintiff have a response?
Yes, Your Honor. We're using this to lay foundation for Mr. Francosio's further testimony. He's going to tell about how these emails impacted his future actions and about how those events led to future interactions with characters that you'll hear about.
Sorry, I just need a moment to read it. Okay, so are you offering it to show that in the past she has had trouble with pesticides, and that makes it more likely that that is what's happening in the future, or what was the other reason?
Well, we're using this to establish that, yes, Ms. Harper Martini did have pest control issues, and she did need advice from Mr. Danny Francosio, but we're also using this to establish a foundation for Mr. Francosio's past interactions and kind of lay the foundation for Mr. Francosio and Ms. Martini's relationship.
Does the defense have anything else they want to add real quick?
Yes, Your Honor. I think counsel exactly just stated that they are using this to show action and conformity therewith, and therefore this is character evidence.
I would tend to agree. I believe that the purpose of this email is to establish character and conformity under 404. I think that any relationship between the two parties can be established by testimony. So I will sustain the objection for now.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Francosio, did you respond to these emails?
Yes, I did. I was worried that she would possibly
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
Let's hear the outside the presence of the jury. Let's hear the answer to that question.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Frank.
Yes, sorry.
Okay.
I answered because I was worried that she could poison someone who consumed her wine. I was worried for the consumers and the people of Rapid River, so I decided to take action.
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay. According to case law, International House of Waffles versus America's Best Cookie, a witness's own statements are hearsay.
Your Honor, may I be heard?
Yes, you may.
Mr. Francosio didn't tell us what he said. I asked him if he reacted, and he said yes. He said that he reacted. He gave a reason for why he reacted, but he did not tell us what he said.
It's not direct hearsay, but this seems like a way to indirectly elicit that statement. I'm going to sustain the objection.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Francosio, did you take action after you received these emails?
Yes, I contacted Lonnie Parrish about a possible pesticide contamination at Peony Estates, since knowing how to handle pests is part of the fundamentals of making wine and operating a winery, kind of like knowing how to tackle correctly in football. But in this case, if she didn't do it correctly, someone could die.
Did Miss Paris ever respond to your tip?
No, not initially, not until May of 2019, but a lot of stuff happened then between then and now.
Can you elaborate about what happened between that time?
Sure. Harper Martini's son, Casey, and his fiance, Genesis, actually came up to me about wanting to have their wedding at Rosie and Pedro's, which made me very excited. But unfortunately, Harper did force them to move their wedding to Peony and sent me a dubious apology email in exchange.
And was this the last time you spoke with Miss Martini?
Unfortunately, it was not. Harper did, after her emails, Harper did send me voicemails about Casey and Genesis' wedding. I wasn't a therapist, but she didn't seem to care. Honestly, I wasn't very interested in how she was doing, but after that investigator that I told you about earlier, Lonnie, contacted me, I made sure to pay attention to everything that Harper says.
What did Miss Paris contact you about?
She actually had taken my tip up from a while back and was wondering if I had any additional information. I didn't, but I made sure to pay attention to anything that Harper said to me after.
Mr. Francasio, what did Miss Martini say to you after?
Harper sent me an email saying that Peony had failed another health code inspection.
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay.
Your Honor, may I be heard? You're on mute.
Yes, you may.
Your Honor, under 801 D2D, Miss Martini is an agent of Peony Estates, and therefore anything that she says is an exclusion to hearsay.
Well, as long as she's an agent and it's within the scope of her employment, that rule does apply. Is that what's occurring here?
Yes.
Okay. Does defense have any response to that?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. In that case, I'm going to overrule that objection. You may proceed.
Thank you.
Mr. Francasio, what was your response to her approach? Sorry, proceed.
Well, I gave her the advice because I care about the consumers. I was also I was also concerned about Casey's wedding since it was coming up and Harper would definitely need to handle the pest infestation quickly in order to host the wedding.
And what advice did you give her?
I gave her the name of a product that I use to flush out drains.
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay.
Response?
Your Honor, this is simply laying foundation for Mr. Francasio's actions.
Okay. Just outside the presence of the jury, can I hear the answer to that question? You told her the name of a pesticide to flush drains?
No, sir. It was a product that we use to flush our drains out.
Your Honor, may I be heard?
You may.
According to case law, International House of Waffles versus America's Best Cookie, a witness's own statements are hearsay, and then so therefore this is hearsay.
Yes, but they have to be proving the truth of the statement. I don't think a suggestion about a it was a suggestion about what pesticide to use. Is that the testimony basically?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna overrule the objection.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Francasio, can you go ahead and tell us again what advice you gave her?
Yes. I gave her the name of a product that we used to flush out the drain since she had a clogged up drain. And also I advised her to clean out the cellar and warehouse completely. But I was very surprised that these issues occurred.
Why were you surprised?
Well, I couldn't imagine that she had forgotten all of her training that she had received while working for me. Granted, my managers had done an amazing job training and supervising.
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation.
Sustained.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Francasio, what did Ms. Martini do with your advice?
I've heard that she took it under consideration, but I don't know. But knowing her and after what Genesis had told me earlier, I don't think that she took it.
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation.
Sustained.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Francasio, what makes you say that?
Well, Genesis asked me how one could anonymously report a health code violation based off of something she had seen. And I told her why, but I don't know what she did with that.
No further questions, Your
Honor. Does the defense wish to cross-examine the witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you may proceed when ready.
Mr. Francasio, Peony Estates is your biggest rival, correct?
That is correct.
And when Peony Estates opened in 2015, it severely harmed your business.
It was expected, but yes.
And by 2016, your orders went down.
Yes.
You lost visitors.
Yes.
Staff morale was low.
It did lower a bit.
And you took a 25% pay cut.
I did, so I wouldn't have to lay anyone off.
And you blame Harper for your business's struggle.
No, I mean, it was expected. If someone's going to, if in any business, if a competitor is going to arise, lower demand for your product is going to lower. So it's a fact. I didn't consider the fact that Peony Estates was my competitor as the reason why. It was just merely a fact.
You didn't say that Harper was the reason for your business's struggles?
Peony Estates. Harper and Peony Estates.
So Peony Estates was the reason for your business's struggles?
As a competitor in the wine industry, yes.
And it was in 2016 that you called Mr. Paris to investigate Peony Estates?
That is correct.
And now, Mr. Francasio, prior to 2015, Mr. Martini used to work for you, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And he was a good employee?
Yes, he was.
You promoted her to vineyard manager after 2 years, right?
I did because my other two managers had to leave.
You credit her as being instrumental in putting Rosie and Pedro on the map.
I do.
Ms. Martini also is in charge of keeping your cellars clear of pests, correct?
That was one of her responsibilities, yes.
Now, in the 4 years since then, you never set foot in Peony Estates, did you?
I have not.
You never observed where Harper stored her pesticides?
Personally, no.
You never observed how Harper applied her pesticides?
No, I just know what she emailed me.
You have no idea whether Harper improperly used her pesticides?
Well, it seemed like she was having a pretty concerning pesticide problem at Peony Estates based off of emails that she did send me.
But you never witnessed Harper ever using pesticides, did you?
While she was working for me, yes.
But in Peony Estates, you have never witnessed Harper's use of pesticides?
No, I have not.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Does the plaintiff wish to do a brief redirect?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Mr. Francosi, you may step down, and the plaintiff may call their next witness at this time.
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff calls Lonnie Paris to the stand.
You may proceed.
Good morning, Ms. Paris. Could you please introduce yourself to the court?
Hey y'all, my name is Lonnie Paris.
And what do you do for a living?
Well, I'm a journalist and I also have a pretty successful blog on the side called Life in Paris because of my last name in the city. But recently I've really been trying to get back into investigative journalism.
And why is that?
Well, I had a pretty good story come across my way. It was actually originally back from 2016, but I just recently followed up on it.
Well, what story is that, Ms. Paris?
Well, I'd gotten this tip in 2016 about Peony Estates potentially mishandling pesticides around their wine, and I decided to follow up on it back in July 2018.
What made you change your mind in 2018?
I was looking for an entry for Life in Paris, and I didn't really have anything going at the time, so I went through my old notes and I came across that tip again. I did a preliminary search and I saw that Peony Estates was actually located right next to a swamp. So I figured that maybe there were some little buggies around there, and I decided to go to Peony Estates myself to check out.
Did you go to Peony Estates?
I did, yes. I went in July of 2018, I believe, and I took a guided tour of the property where I actually learned that they only produce wine that takes a year to produce. That was pretty helpful to my investigation later on, but at the time I wanted to get some more behind the scenes look at what was going on there. So I went ahead and went into the employees only section, and that's where I got the real scoop.
What did you find out, Ms. Paris?
Well, I saw quite a few cans of pesticide just laying around willy-nilly. And I also saw this note from Austin Lewis, who is the head winekeeper or winemaker, I guess, at Peony Estates.
Objection, Your Honor. Lack of personal knowledge.
Your Honor, if I may be heard.
You may.
I don't see exactly how Ms. Paris would not have personal knowledge as to what the positions are at Peony Estates. Not only has she said that she visited and took tours of Peony Estates, she also said she saw a note from this person, which we will admit further into evidence. If you may make our offer of proof.
Yeah, outside the presence of the jury, I will allow you to attempt to lay that foundation through an offer of proof.
Yes, Your Honor. We will admit Exhibit 12 into evidence, which will show that this note, which Ms. Paris is referring to, has Austin Lewis, head winemaker, clearly labeled.
May I respond?
Yeah, you may respond.
Your Honor, foundation should be laid before they begin discussing these things. If they're able to lay that foundation prior to discussing who he is, then I wouldn't have had an objection, but that foundation has not been laid, and therefore this witness has not established personal knowledge yet.
Your Honor, if I may be heard.
Yes, briefly.
Again, we're not discussing exactly what his title was. The fact that she knows his title does not need foundation, as that is not the core of her testimony. She merely said that she found a letter from a person, which we will further lay foundation to admit into evidence. This is a foundational question.
I will allow you to attempt to lay the foundation that she has seen the note and what it said. However, if you cannot lay the foundation as to how she would know Mr. Lewis's title, then I will not admit that testimony.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Paris, would you recognize a copy of this note if I were to show it to you in court today?
Oh, I sure would, yeah.
Your Honor, permission for co-counsel to bring up Exhibit 12.
Granted.
I apologize, I'm having the technical difficulty. Please give me 30 more seconds.
No problem.
If you could scroll down a bit. Ms. Paris, do you recognize this exhibit?
Yes, I do.
And is it a fair and accurate representation?
It seems to be, yeah.
And have any alterations been made to it?
Not that I can tell.
Your Honor, the plaintiff offers Exhibit 12 into evidence.
Does the defense wish to be heard?
Yes, Your Honor. I have an objection to character evidence.
Your Honor, may be heard.
You may.
If they could specify us exactly what part of the exhibit that they believe is improper character evidence.
Yes, if the defense could provide grounds as to how this constitutes character evidence, that would be great.
Yes, Your Honor. The contents of this letter will state that Peony Estates was dealing with a pesticide problem at this particular point in time. The plaintiff is going to use this to insinuate that because they had a pesticide problem in the past, that they now have one for the incident in question in today's case, which is trying to show action and conformity therewith.
Your Honor, may be heard.
You may.
Pesticide use is not a character trait. Moreover, we're not going to use this to show that because they used pesticides in the past, that they were more likely to use pesticides on the incident in question. Moreover, this is in 2018, and if I may make an offer of proof.
Let me ask, I apologize, I'm not incredibly familiar with the dates in this case. How close is this to the actual occurrence that we are here for today?
This is exactly during the time where the actual occurrence matters. I need to make an offer of proof in order to explain how.
Okay, you may proceed.
In this case, when pesticides are used in 2018, the wines take a year to ferment. The person died in 2019. So if pesticide use begins in 2018, as it says in this letter, then the person in question would have died potentially as a result. Therefore, this is not used in conduct and conformity. This is the incident in question.
Brief response from the defense.
Yes, Your Honor. This is still a letter that dates an entire year prior to when the actual event occurred. And because of this, it is a definite past action. And they're trying to show that because there was pesticide use back then, that the pesticide that was drank a year later had pesticide as well. This is, by definition, character evidence.
Again, Your Honor, if I may respond.
Briefly.
Yes, again, because these wines take a year to ferment, the actions that occurred with pesticide use a year before the death are the most relevant actions, not even compared to the ones that occurred on the year of.
Okay. I tend to agree with the plaintiff here. I don't believe that this is trying to show that because they've used pesticides in the past, it would have been on this occasion. I tend to agree that given the proximity in time to the actual event, that this bears directly on the occurrence. So I'm going to allow the testimony.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Paris, what did you learn from this note?
Well, I found out that Peony Estates was in the middle of a pest infestation. I mean, in the middle of the first paragraph, it literally says attempts to ignore the issue have failed. And to me, that made it sound like the problem had been going on for a while and they just hadn't done anything about it. Then the note went on to say that they'd be spraying pesticides.
Objection to lack of personal knowledge. This witness is basing an assumption about past pesticide use based off one sentence in the middle of a letter that they found in the back. And prior to this, they had no even experience about Peony Estates. They can't make this kind of extrapolation based off of one sentence.
Your Honor, if I may be heard.
Yes, briefly.
She's not making extrapolation based in fact. She's saying that there's a probability based on what she wrote in the note. She's not making any speculations here beyond what she can rationally perceive with her five senses.
I tend to agree with the defense here. I'll allow her to testify as to what's written in the note, but I think for her to insinuate that this is, it goes beyond her personal knowledge. So I'm going to sustain that objection.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
Now, Ms. Paris, can you tell us more about what you learned from this note?
Well, like I said, it just said that attempts to ignore the pesticide infestation or the pest infestation had failed and that they would be spraying pesticides in the future to try and get it under control.
Your Honor, permission for co-counsel to take down this exhibit.
Granted.
Ms. Paris, what did you do after reading this note?
Well, I left pretty quickly after, but after reading about how they'd ignored the situation, I felt that it was definitely a story that I wanted to continue to pursue.
So what did you do next?
I made several frequent visits to Peony Estates after that, but I also brushed myself up on relevant health code statutes, just so if there was a violation taking place, I could be familiar with it. I was actually in the middle of doing all this digging when I had a bit of a light bulb moment.
What did you realize, Ms. Paris?
Well, I realized, like I had said earlier, that if Peony Estates only produced wine that took a year to produce, then their 2018 wine, which was being sprayed for pesticides based on the note I saw, it meant that the 2019 batch had a potential of being contaminated.
Now, you mentioned that you returned to Peony Estates again. Could you tell us when this was?
Yeah, like I said, I made several visits there, but I had my next big breakthrough in May of 2019.
What was that breakthrough, Ms. Paris?
Well, I found out that they were supposed to have a surprise inspection, and I double checked with my inside source at the FDA, who confirmed that they were scheduled to have a surprise inspection
Objection,
after
Your Honor.
the anonymous complaint had been formed.
Your Honor, if I may be heard.
I apologize. Would the defense repeat their grounds?
Yes, Your Honor. Objection to hearsay. This witness is discussing statements by an inside source from the FDA that has never been introduced and is an out-of-court statement being used for the truth of the matter asserted.
Your Honor, if I may be heard.
You may.
And I may make an offer of proof as well.
I'll allow it.
We're using this for foundational purposes. Further testimony will show that Ms. Paris will do further action on her investigation in this case because she had an inside source in the FDA. We're not concerned with what the FDA source said, but rather that what they said affected Ms. Paris's actions.
Okay. So you're offering for effect on the listener rather than to prove that the FDA was going to inspect Peony Estates.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Then for that purpose, I will allow the statement.
Now, after hearing that there was going to be a surprise inspection, what did you do next?
Well, I went back to Peony Estates on the day of the inspection, and I went into the wine cellar where I noticed a couple of things. I saw that there was this bottle of wine called Cara that was sitting all by itself on a shelf near the bottling area. And I also saw that all the pesticide cans that I'd seen before had magically disappeared somehow. Excuse me. I actually also overheard a conversation between the health inspector and the owner of Peony Estates, Harper Martini, in which I'm pretty sure they were discussing health code violations.
Objection, Your Honor, to hearsay.
Your Honor, exactly which part of the testimony he believes is hearsay?
You may allow it.
Yes, particularly to the discussion between the FDA inspector and Mrs. Martini, and that the contents of that they were discussing was health code violations. This is an out-of-court statement by the FDA inspector being used for the truth of the matter asserted.
Your Honor, if I may be heard.
You may.
I believe that opposing counsel has misunderstood what the witness said. The witness never said that the FDA inspector said it was health code violations. He said it was a conversation between Ms. Martini, an agent of Peony Estates, who we've established in pre-trial, can have her statements brought in as an exclusion to hearsay. Therefore, this is not hearsay.
Okay.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
Yes, Your Honor. They did not specifically elicit any statements from the party opponent, Ms. Martini. They're just talking about a discussion between Ms. Martini and the health inspector. And again, they were discussing health code violations in this particular instance, not just the statements of Ms. Martini, but the overall conversation.
Your Honor, if I may be heard.
You may.
We do not care about the contents of the overall conversation, but that the specific statements that Ms. Martini gave were pertinent to a health code violation. We do not care what the inspector said, but that Martini's statement specifically revolved around that context. Even without the inspector's statements, her testimony wouldn't change.
I believe under 801 D2D that Ms. Martini would be an agent of Peony Estates and a party opponent as well. So I'm going to allow, I guess, this statement to come in.
Ms. Paris, did you get a chance to finish your response?
No, I just said that I'd overheard that conversation between Harper and the inspector regarding possible health code violations taking place at Peony Estates in that May of 2019.
And did you get a chance to look at anything else at Peony Estates?
Unfortunately not. Austin Lewis almost caught me, but once he spoke, I recognized his voice as the person who'd been talking about the health code inspection a couple days earlier, but I just went ahead and left after that.
And was this the last time that you were there at Peony Estates?
No, it wasn't. The last time I was investigating the story was actually on June 7th, 2019, which was the day of Harper's son's, Casey, and his fiance Genesis's wedding rehearsal. I went back there, and while I was there, I saw some things that definitely made it seem like there was possible pesticide exposure to their wine.
What did you see?
I noticed a can of pesticide spray laying right next to the bottling station. I mean, I could barely believe my own eyes. That was such a big red flag to me. I also saw that the bottle of Cara wine that I'd seen almost a month earlier didn't look like it had been moved at all. My anticipation about this possible contaminated wine being given to consumers only got worse a couple minutes later.
Why was that, Miss Paris?
Well, while I was there, I saw Harper come in, and she actually took the bottle of Cara, and I later saw what I assumed to be the same bottle of Cara given to Genesis later that night. Genesis seemed pretty disoriented after drinking it, and I really wanted to try and talk to her, but there were just too many people there, and I didn't want to blow my cover, so I left.
Objection, Your Honor, to specifically to a lack of personal knowledge as to whether Genesis was disoriented. That's not something
Or
that
if it may be heard.
You may.
A person's appearance to be disoriented or lacking body control or lacking balance is something that she can perceive. And she's not saying that Genesis was disoriented, but that she appeared disoriented to her based on her five senses. This is clearly not speculation or lack of personal knowledge.
Your Honor, may I be heard?
Yes.
The witness can maybe state to what she observed, maybe specific actions of Ms. Petrillo at that time, but disoriented is a mental state, and that is something that they don't have any insight into.
Your Honor, if it may be heard.
Briefly, yes.
Based on what the witness said, disoriented is not being used as a mental state here. It's being used as a physical state in terms of lack of balance, lack of coordination. The witness clearly established that in terms of how she wasn't able to talk to the witness, and therefore that she would like to talk to her next time because she was so disoriented and surrounded by people.
I apologize. Did the witness testify that Miss Harper was stumbling about or unable to control her bodily functions, or was it just a statement that she seemed disoriented?
It was just a statement that she appeared disoriented.
Okay. If the witness is able to testify to facts establishing that she would be disoriented, like she was visibly having trouble controlling her body, I will allow the testimony. However, if you were unable to testify to those facts and lay that foundation, I would ask that you move on from that.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Paris, you said that she appeared disoriented. Why is that?
Well, I just saw her on the dance floor, and she seemed a little out of it to me.
Ms. Paris, you also mentioned that you wanted to talk to Genesis the next day. Did you get the chance?
Unfortunately.
Sorry, objection, Your Honor. I re-raised my objection to lack of personal knowledge. It didn't elicit any specific movements, just that she seemed out of it, which is no different than disoriented.
Yeah,
Your Honor, if it may be heard.
I'm sorry. Based on that testimony, I'm going to sustain that as lack of personal knowledge.
Yes, Your Honor.
If there's any sort of testimony as to actual bodily function, I'll allow it. But otherwise, I would urge you to move on.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Paris, you mentioned that you wanted to talk to Genesis the next day. Did you get the chance?
No, unfortunately not. I was going to show up for the next day, which was the day of the wedding, but I found out that Genesis had been rushed to the hospital, and I later heard that she had passed away from pesticide poisoning.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Objection, Your Honor.
Grounds?
Objection to hearsay that Ms. Paris heard that she had been rushed to the hospital and died. This calls for an out-of-court statement being used for truth and not asserted and is hearsay.
Your Honor, if it may be heard.
You may.
We are not using this for the truth of the matter asserted. She simply stated that she felt bad. She later followed that statement when she felt bad for Genesis, which is a response of the listener. We're not concerned with what happened to Genesis at the hospital, but that Ms. Paris felt bad later on.
I I guess my follow-up question to that would be is in what way would Ms. Shannon's feelings about that be relevant in this case?
Well, Your Honor, again, it goes to her credibility towards the case, which is her attitudes and how much she knows about the case, which it all goes to show that this statement was said and heard by Ms. Shannon or by Ms. Paris.
I tend to agree that it's hearsay and can be established through other evidence. So I'm going to sustain that objection.
Yes, Your Honor. Well, Ms. Paris, when you found out about what happened to Genesis, what was your response?
Well, I felt quite bad. I mean, the entire reason I was researching this case and investigating Peony Estates was because of possible pesticide mishandling. And then I heard that she had passed away from pesticide poisoning.
Objection, Your Honor. I raised my same objection to hearsay that she heard that they'd passed away because of pesticide poisoning.
Your Honor, if I may be heard.
You may.
She clearly showed that her response to the problem was that she felt bad and that she published her investigation as a result. We're not using this to show that Genesis died from pesticide poisoning. We're using this to show that her response was based on what she heard.
Yeah, I think having heard a little more testimony, I will allow this. And I don't assume the defense is trying to dispute that she didn't die, correct?
No, Your Honor, but specifically that she had heard that she had died of pesticide poisoning, and that's why she published her article.
Your Honor, again, I'm sorry if I may be heard.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Again, opposing counsel just explained exactly what I did, which is she published her article, which makes all her findings relevant to today's case because she heard that Genesis died from pesticide poisoning in particular. Again, whether or not that is true will be disputed later in trial, but because it was pesticide poisoning, it prompted her to publish the article.
Is there going to be testimony that, do you anticipate introducing testimony that pesticide poisoning was the cause of death?
Yes, but not through Ms. Paris, through other witnesses later in trial.
Okay, I'm going to allow it for the effect on the listener, but not for the truth within the statement at this time.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Ms. Paris, did you end up publishing that article?
I did, yes. I was actually working on it in hopes of regaining a job that I was going after at the time. But yeah, after hearing about all the facts and investigating, I published the article.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Does the defense wish to cross-examine the witness?
Oh, yes, Your Honor.
All right, you may proceed when ready.
Good morning, Ms. Paris. I'd like to ask you a few questions about your testimony today.
Yeah.
Now, Ms. Paris, reporting on Peony Estates has been good for your career, hasn't it?
It has, yes.
In fact, when you first began investigating Peony Estates back in 2016, you were unemployed.
I was, yes. Unfortunately, I've been laid off due to budgetary issues.
That's right. And you saw this as an opportunity to rejuvenate your career, correct?
Well, I was looking for any story that might help me get a paying job back, yeah.
And now, after reporting the story, you do have a potential offer to work with TBD Magazine, right?
I do, yes.
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance.
I respond.
You may.
Your Honor, this goes to the bias of the witness, and the bias is extremely relevant in today's case, especially to her testimony.
Your Honor, if I may be heard.
Yes.
They're referring to her employment after the incidents in question, and that employment condition is not relevant to the case at hand. If they'd like to discuss her investigation or any matter that she had during the incidents in question, perhaps that could go to show to her bias, but these are events that happened after.
May I make an offer of proof, Your Honor?
I'm
May I
sorry.
make an offer of proof?
I'll allow it.
Thank you. Right. After reporting on the story, you got an offer to work with TBD Magazine, correct?
Yes, I did.
Your Honor, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but you haven't ruled on the previous objection.
He's making I'm letting him make a brief offer of proof just so I can understand.
Oh.
Real quick.
I apologize, Your Honor. I thought you said I'll allow it as in my statement. So,
I apologize. I'll allow you to ask 2 or 3 questions just to understand the evidence, and then we'll make a ruling on it outside the presence.
Yes, Your Honor.
now, you've been offered a potential position with TBD, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
But this position is predicated on you still drumming up interest in the story, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And in fact, you'll be writing a story for them today on your testimony, won't you?
I was asked to, yes, so it's something that I'll think about.
And if the story is good, you will get that position with TBD, correct?
I
Objection,
might.
Your Honor.
but-
I re-raise my objection to relevance, if I may be heard.
I'm gonna allow it just because bias is always relevant, and given that she still has a stake in this story as of today and its success, I do think it bears a little bit on bias, so I will allow it.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, now we've talked a bit about your story. Now I'd like to talk to you about what you actually found. Now, you first got this tip about Peony Estates in 2016, correct?
Yes, that's right.
And that tip was from Danny Francasio, the owner of Rosie and Pedro, correct?
It was, yes.
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay.
May I respond?
You may.
I don't believe I elicited any specific statement here.
Your Honor, if I may be heard.
Yes.
He did elicit a statement. Specifically, he first heard about the tip about Peony Estates pesticide issues, not particularly pesticide issues, but issues at Peony Estates, which would be hearsay.
May I make may I respond, Your Honor?
You may.
We don't care about the truth value of this statement, whether or not he actually said, whether he gave that tip or not. We're using this for the subsequent action of the witness, which is that they then investigated Peony Estates.
Okay. I'm going to allow it for the effect on the listener.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Parrish, you got this tip from Danny Francasio, the owner of Rosie and Pedro, correct?
I did, yes.
He warned you about potential misuse of pesticide?
Well, he said that he thought there might be potential misuse of pesticide.
But you looked through the internet and found nothing related to this claim, correct?
No, I didn't see anything about a death because of pesticide poisoning at the time, and I had another huge story on my plate, so I just pushed it to the back burner.
In fact, you also believe that this tip was biased, didn't you?
No, I just had other stuff going on, and since I didn't see any direct evidence of a pesticide poison and death at Peony Estates, I, like I said, put the story on the back burner. I get tips like that quite often, so I didn't really think much of it.
But you also believed that this tip coming from Danny Francasio was biased because he was his largest competitor, correct?
Yeah, like I said, I get tips like this all the time, so I got to take them with a grain of salt.
So that's a yes that you believe this tip was biased.
Yes.
Right. And you didn't pick up on this story again until 2 years later, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And as you said, at the time prior, you had work, but at this time you were no longer working as an investigative reporter, right?
No, like I said, there were some budgetary cuts at my prior workplace.
Yeah. So you reopened your investigation into Peony Estates, right?
Yeah, I was just looking for any story that might help me get some money.
And actually, you first visited Peony Estates on July 13th, right?
Yes, that sounds right.
In that first visit, you found nothing wrong.
No, I hadn't taken a tour, so I had very limited access to everything, so I didn't really find anything on that visit.
So that's a yes, you found nothing wrong on your first visit to Peony Estates?
Right, because I couldn't get into the actual property without taking a tour.
So next you visited again 3 days later on July 16th, right?
Yes, that's right. And again, that's when I took that guided tour and was able to see a lot more Peony Estates.
That's right, you snuck into the employees only area, correct?
I did, yes. These businesses generally don't air their dirty laundry out where the public can see them.
And back there you found cans of pesticide?
I did, yes.
Now you didn't see where this pesticide had been applied, correct?
I'm sorry, are you asking if I saw like where they sprayed it or?
Yes.
No, yeah, I didn't see where they sprayed it, but I did see those cans of pesticide in the wine cellar.
You didn't see how it had been applied, did you?
No, I didn't.
And you don't know when those were applied?
No, I just saw those cans in the wine cellar, which I thought was pretty concerning. It was very close to the product that they were going to be selling to consumers.
But again, you never saw how this pesticide was used, correct?
No, I didn't, but it still concerned
Objection,
me.
Your Honor. Asked, answered.
Sustained.
You didn't see any evidence of this pesticide being in the wine, did you?
Well, not in the wine. I didn't drink it myself, but like I said, it was extremely close to where they were producing it, which made me nervous.
But that's a yes, you didn't see it any evidence of the pesticide being in the wine, correct?
Well, no, I'm honestly not quite sure how I'd test for that. I'm just a journalist.
So that is yes.
Yes.
And you saw a note discussing a pesticide problem, correct?
Yes, from Austin Lewis.
So to be clear, what you found from that investigation was a note saying there was a pest problem and pesticides to solve it.
What I saw was a note that deeply insinuated that the pesticide issue had been going on for a while. Austin literally wrote in his memo, attempts to ignore this issue have failed.
But that's yes, that all you saw was a note talking about pesticide problem and pesticide to address it.
I mean, yeah, I saw a note about ongoing pesticide issues, and I suppose they finally decided it got bad enough that they had to actually do something.
Now, I'd like to talk to you a bit about the health inspection that you mentioned. You returned to Peony Estates to eavesdrop on that inspection, correct?
On May 8th, yes, I wanted to see the inspection.
Mm-hmm. And you overheard a conversation between Harper and the health inspector, right?
I heard parts of it, yeah.
And you didn't hear them discuss specific health code violations being broken, did you?
I didn't hear any specific violations, but I reckon that the term health code violation isn't super promising during an inspection.
Well, don't health inspectors look for health violations? Isn't that their job?
I would assume so.
So all you heard was a health inspector discussing health codes with the owner, correct?
Discussing health code violations with the owner, yes.
And Peony Estates remained open after that inspection, correct?
Yes, they did.
But you decided to visit Peony Estates again in 2019, correct?
I did, yes. I believe that the health code inspection was actually in 2019.
Yes, but you, let me rephrase, you did visit Peony Estates again in 2019, correct?
Yes, the health code inspection that we were just speaking about occurred, I believe, on May 9th, 2019, or May 30th, perhaps.
And you returned for Casey Genesis's wedding, correct?
Yes, I did.
And in this particular time, you actually broke into the employees only area, correct?
I dressed up as
Objection, Your Honor. Attorney testifying as to broke in. I don't think that he can say that she broke in, rather that she entered.
Your Honor, may I make
You may respond, yeah.
my line of questioning will continue to show that she used a lockpick to open a door that was locked and then enter, which constitutes breaking in.
Your Honor, if it may be heard.
I will allow you to question her as to how she gained entry using the lockpick, but I would ask you not to. If you can establish that she broke in with the lockpick, I will allow you to return to the broke-in question. But at this time, there's no foundation that she would have broken into that room.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Pierce, you used a lockpick to open a door that was locked, the employees only area, correct?
I did, yes.
And there you saw a bottle of Carl wine on the shelf, right?
Yes, it was that same bottle that I'd actually seen almost a month earlier, and it didn't look like it'd been moved.
Well, you said you saw that a month early. You don't know if it's the same bottle, do you?
Well, it was the only bottle I'd seen on the shelf both times, so I figured it was the same one.
You don't think a winery could have 2 different bottles of wine in a month span?
Well, like I said, the first time I saw it there, it was the only bottle on that entire shelf. And the second time I saw it there, again, it was the same bottle in the same place.
You don't know if it's the exact same bottle, do you?
No, I don't know for sure, but like I said, I feel like it is just because it hadn't moved at all.
So you feel like it is, but you don't know for sure.
No, like I just said, I don't know for sure.
You also mentioned you saw a can of bug spray, right?
Yes, right next to the bottling station.
And again, you don't know when this bottle of pesticide was used, do you?
I don't, but that can was almost empty, which concerned me even more.
But you don't know how that bottle of pesticide was used, do you?
No, I don't.
You didn't witness anyone using it?
No, not while I was there.
All you saw was the bottle, correct?
Yes, an almost empty bottle right next to the product that they were supposed to be producing and selling to consumers.
But again, you don't know how the bottle was used, correct?
No, I don't.
You didn't see who used it,
No, I did not.
and you don't know when it was used.
No, I'm not sure. But like I said, the presence of an almost empty can of pesticide in the wine cellar is concern enough.
So, to recap, in your 3 years of investigating, all you ever found was that Peony had a bug problem and empty bottles of pesticides at various times.
Well, yes, but I saw those empty bottles of pesticide in the area where they produced their wine that they were then selling.
So that is a yes to my question, that you had found that Peony had a potential bug problem, that they had used pesticide to address it.
Objection,
Yes.
Your Honor. Compound question.
Can you repeat the question? They had a bug problem and then you found pesticides. That was the
And
question.
that they used pesticides to address it, yes.
Yeah, just break it up.
So Ms. Paris, all you found was that Peony Estates had a pest problem at one point in time, correct?
Yes, I found that apparently they were finally acting on a pest infestation that they'd previously tried to ignore for who knows how long.
And you saw empty bottles of pesticides at 2 different times.
Yes, at 2 different times and very close to where they were producing their wine.
All right, thank you. I have no further questions.
Does the plaintiff wish to have a brief redirect of the witness?
No, thank you, Your Honor. I ask that this witness be allowed to step down.
Ms. Shannon, thank you. You are excused at this time. The plaintiff may call their next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. We'd like to call Inspector Adkins O'Keefe to the stand.
You may proceed when ready.
Good day. Could you please introduce yourself to the court?
Absolutely. Hello, my name is Inspector Adkins O'Keefe.
And what is it that you do for a living, Inspector?
I am a health inspector, health and environmental safety inspector for Rapid River County, and I've worked for the DHES for 10 years.
What background do you have to hold such a position? What kind of background do you have to hold such a position?
I am certified by the FDA. I've worked for the DHES, which works for the FDA, and I've conducted a lot of their inspections for them. I've done this for around 3 years.
Do you have experience inspecting wineries in particular?
Absolutely. I've inspected over 170 wineries in my career.
And what is your involvement in today's case?
I was the senior inspector for Rapid River County that looked at Peony Estates and inspected them 4 times from 2015 to 2019.
And what methods did you utilize to reach the conclusion cited in your reports?
For my conclusionary basis, I use something called an FFIR compliance method. It's a food facility inspection report, as well as a compliance chart, which shows what criteria they meet from the FDA or what criteria they wouldn't meet from the FDA.
And what does this chart entail?
The chart has 4 things that they must meet, all criteria. It's such as in compliance, out of compliance, not observed, or not applicable. In order for a business to remain open, they have to be in compliance with all criteria set by the FDA.
Are the methods you described standard in the industry?
Yes, absolutely. I've used this for over a decade.
So you conducted 4 inspections for Peony Estates. Can you please give us a description of the first inspection?
Absolutely. It was my first inspection. It was in 2015, November, I believe. First thing I did was I made sure everything was up to date. I did the FFIR compliance method. I applied it, made sure I did all the right paperwork, and I inspected the grounds carefully.
And what were the results of this first inspection?
I found that even though they were in compliance with most of their criteria, they were out of compliance with criteria number 27. It was their improper storage of pesticides.
And how exactly was this a violation?
The pesticides are lethal poison, and it can cause harm, or even much worse, it can cause death. And the pesticides were stored much too close to the kitchen and to the wine, and if contaminated, can cause consumers great harm or illness.
And what was the response from the owner of Peony Estates?
I let Harper Martini know that the pesticide needed to be stored at a better location. Harper Martini assured that it was a mistake and then placed it in a better storage area. I then approved of it after seeing it stored in an area that I agreed with.
And then the second inspection, can you provide an account of that?
Yeah, absolutely. The FDA received from an anonymous source that they were using, Peony Estates was using an above average amount of pesticide, and that the FDA wanted.
Objection, Your Honor, to hearsay for the statements of this anonymous source.
May I be heard, John?
You may.
We're not necessarily using the anonymous source to establish any facts in this case. What we are raising or laying actually is the foundation for the subsequent action of the listener. The anonymous source was simply a catalyst to establish another inspection.
Okay, I will allow it for the limited purpose that it compelled another inspection, but will not allow it for the truth that there was some sort of significant amount of pesticides being used.
Thank you, John.
Okay.
So, Mr. O'Keefe, you were on the second inspection. Can you continue?
Yes, absolutely. The FDA received the anonymous report that they were using an above average amount of pesticide and it could cause someone harm in the future. They then let the DHES know, and I was the inspector sent by the DHES to investigate.
And then how did this second inspection go?
I showed up for my inspection. I let Harper Martini know I was there. And upon meeting Harper Martini, he seemed really nervous when I was there to inspect the grounds.
And after the
Objection, Your Honor, to relevance.
Your Honor, we offer this under Rule 803 under the witness's present sense of impression.
Your Honor.
Ms. Skura, 803 is a response to a hearsay objection. I believe the grounds were relevance.
Oh, I apologize, Your Honor. This is simply what this witness understood as the demeanor of the person he was speaking to at the time, something he perceived directly. And it connects to his official role as an inspector prompting subsequent inspections.
I'm gonna sustain that objection. If you can lay grounds as to how he appeared nervous, I'll allow it. But right now, it's speculative.
Understood.
Yes, Your Honor.
Inspector O'Keefe, after this conversation, what happened with the inspection?
I then asked to go see the winery first, the winery area. Harper Martini, again, seemed nervous, wasn't making eye contact with me, wasn't really looking at me, and wanted me to start somewhere else because claimed there was a tour. However, Harper Martini did take me to the wine area where I discovered pest.
And after the conversation, and what did you determine about the pesticide storage location?
After looking at the pest and having the job for as long as I do, I determined they were there for weeks. I then determined that I needed to take samples from the wine, which I did at random, and sent that to the lab to get tested.
And did you speak with anyone else at that inspection?
I then asked to speak to the employees alone, and Harper Martini agreed.
And who did you speak with?
I spoke with Austin Lewis. I asked about the storage of pesticides because of the first inspection. There was a mishap with the storage. Austin Lewis let me know that there was indeed another place employees would store the pesticide, contrary to where Harper Martini said they placed them. And I said this was an inconvenience to the employees.
Objection, Your Honor, to hearsay for the statements of the inspector.
I'm sorry, I don't understand you. What is hearsay in the testimony?
Sorry, God.
Yes, Your Honor. I was going to say to the inspector's own statements.
Well, the inspector is testifying in his official capacity as an expert witness and as an inspector, and he's sharing the results of his inspections, which is crucial to the case at hand.
Again, I would still say pertinent to Midland's relevant case law, Americans Best Cookie versus House of Waffle. A witness's own statements still are considered hearsay in the Midlands district and cannot be used in that way. Excuse me.
I'm gonna sustain the objection. Also, I apologize. I don't believe the witness was ever tendered as an expert. If you wish to, is that assumed in this competition? Yes. Okay. I'm sorry.
No, it is not assumed,
Okay.
but it is. If opposing counsel wishes to, they can try and qualify them as an expert.
If you wish to have him, I was going to bring it up, but if you wish to have him qualify as an expert, I need you to tender the witness to do so.
Your Honor, I went through the witness's position, his experience, his methods, and I established all of the rules to establish this witness as an expert.
I did hear that. There just has to be a formal offer regarding what field you believe him to be an expert in. If you can give me that, that would be, and then we'll hear if there's any objection.
Your Honor, this witness is an expert with respect to health and safety inspections and pesticide use, cleanliness, et cetera, conditions of food and beverage facilities. He's been in the business for 10 years.
Okay, so the field of tender is health and safety in the food and beverage industry. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Is there any objection to that tender?
Your Honor, I have no objection if the witness wishes to testify as an expert in his job capacity as, a health and safety inspector and understanding of the regulations and what would constitute violations of those regulations.
Okay. In that case, the witness has been formally tendered as an expert. The hearsay objection is sustained. As to the inspector's own statements, you may proceed.
Thank you. I believe, Ms. Inspector O'Keefe, we left off with the conversation that you had after the inspection with Mr. Lewis.
Absolutely. I spoke with Austin Lewis about the storage of pesticide. Austin informed me that employees don't bring the pesticide back to the storage location that Harper Martini said they did, and that it was indeed an inconvenience.
So what was your next step about learning about a different storage facility?
Practice was unsafe, so I let Austin Lewis and Harper Martini know that I would be back for another inspection.
And what prompted that unscheduled inspection?
It was an unscheduled inspection because of the last inspection. So for the third inspection, I went back in 2019 to inspect the grounds again.
And what did you find at that time?
I did the exact same process I did in the previous inspections. However, on the third inspection, I found 4 health violations within the bottling facility. The first violation was bottles of pesticide in the bottling facility. The second health code violation was that the drainage system didn't properly work and that the pesticide, which is poison, was not draining properly. The third violation was the employees were not even aware of the importance of keeping pesticide away from the wine. And the fourth violation was a bottle
Objection to speculation to the knowledge of whether or not the employees were in fact aware. I believe the witness is able to testify to what specific things that he perceived about the understanding level of the employees regarding the use of pesticide, but cannot say that they did not know foreseeably. That would force him to delve into their mindset.
I'm going to sustain that. If you can testify as to underlying facts as how they would not be aware of how to properly store pesticides, I will allow that. But I agree right now that it is diving into the mindset. Sustained.
Inspector O'Keefe, did you have conversations with employees of Peony Estates?
Yes, upon finding the health code violations during my report, I did interview the employees and found that they did not understand the importance of keeping pesticide away from the wine, which resulted in my third health code violation within my report.
Okay, and what did you do with the information about these violations?
Well, after finding the 4 health code violations, I let Harper Martini know that they would be placed on a probationary basis to operate and that they had 40 days to fix all 4 health code violations or they would be suspended. And I would follow up with a unscheduled inspection.
And did that unscheduled inspection take place?
Yes, absolutely did. I returned in 2019 again within the 40 days. And I found that the first 3 health code violations were fixed. However, the bottle of Cara wine was still there unmoved.
Your Honor, that's time.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have nothing further.
Okay. Thank you to whoever brought that up. And does the defense wish to make a cross-examination of the witness?
Yes, Your Honor. But before I begin, if I may inquire to how much time I have to conduct this.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
According to my timer, at least, you have 2 minutes and 50 seconds left.
Thank you.
Plaintiff's timer is currently sitting at 2:45, but we'll be okay with.
Roger. Thank
Okay.
you. May I proceed?
You may.
So, Mr. O'Keefe, the first time that you inspected Peony Estates was in 2015, right?
That is correct, sir. That was when my first inspection did take place.
Right. And during that inspection, you found that the production area of the wine cave, and the bottling facility were all sanitary, well-maintained, and posed no safety concerns, in your opinion.
The only thing out of compliance was the storage of pesticides. That is correct, sir.
Right. But the production area, the bottling facility, and the wine cave were all completely in compliance, and you had no health code issues with those areas specifically.
Everything besides the storage of pesticide, yes, sir, that was in compliance.
Okay. Now, the next time that you inspected Peony Estates was in July of 2018, correct?
That is correct, sir. For my second inspection, that is correct.
And during that period in time, you collected samples of 20% of the wine barrels in Peony Estates' wine cellar, and for them to be tested for contaminants, right?
At random, sir, yes. I did take wine at random to test because of the dead pest.
And you are familiar with the results of those tests, right?
That is correct, sir. When I got the test of the results said there was nothing wrong and there was no further action required.
Right. So just to be clear, you tested all of those 2018 wines, and every single one of them contained safe levels of contaminants. Isn't that right?
Sir, I did not test all the wine. I tested wine at random. It was specifically 20%.
Right. But of all of the samples that you collected, all of them
Objection, Your
contained
Honor.
safe levels of contaminants.
Browns.
Asked and answered.
I don't believe the question was answered.
Can you repeat your question, sir?
Right. So again, just to be clear, of all of the samples that you took from Peony Estates from that 2018 wine, every single one of them contained safe levels of contaminants. Isn't that right?
Yes, of the samples of only 20% of the wine. That is correct, sir.
And just to be clear, every single one of the samples you took had identical levels of contaminants in them, did they not?
Repeat the question, sir.
All of the contaminants levels across all the samples were identical, yes?
That is correct, sir.
Okay. And you actually recommended that Harper Martini spray the wine cellar for pests, correct?
Well, they live next to a swamp, so they actually were using pesticide before I came.
Okay. And Harper Martini clearly explained to you how to conduct a pesticide spraying in a safe manner, right?
Yes, he did explain the process, which I agreed with. It just wasn't the storage of pesticide.
Okay. Now, in 2019, you inspected Peony Estates in May. Isn't that right?
For which inspection do you refer to, sir?
In May 2019, you inspected in May.
Yes, sir, for my third inspection.
And you found that the wine cellar, the vineyard, and the production area all posed no health violations in your inspection, yes?
Only the bottling facility with 4 violations, yes, sir.
Okay, but again, all of the other areas of the vineyard that I mentioned, none of them had any health concerns in your opinion, yes?
That is correct, sir. Only the bottling facility.
And you mentioned that you found pesticides near the bottling area, but you didn't ask anyone if those pesticides were stored in the bottling area permanently, did you?
Sir, it doesn't matter. That was just one of the health code violations.
Right, but you did not ask any employee whether, like, if they stored them in there permanently, yes or no?
Sir, the reason they're not allowed to be stored there permanently, sir.
I'm not asking.
That's fine.
I would urge the witness to answer the last question, and then we will close the plaintiff's case in chief.
Yes, Your Honor.
So just to clarify my question, yes or no, you did not ask anyone in the bottling facility if those pesticides were stored there permanently?
No, sir, even though they shouldn't be.
Okay, that is ahead of time, so thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Is everybody cool if we take like a 2-minute break and then we will move into the defense case?
Yes, Your Honor, no objections from the defense.
Okay.
None from the plaintiff. Thank you.
Sorry. Okay, at 11:58, the defense will call their first witness. Good.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Is the defense ready to call their first witness at this time?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Blair Osborne to the stand.
All right. Mr. Osborne, you have been pre-sworn. You may proceed when ready.
Could you please state your full name for the court spelling the last?
Yes, Blair Osborne, Osborne.
And what do you do for a living, Mr. Osborne?
I own an event planning business, the best in Midlands, catering, decorations, and lodging for all your weddings, parties, bar mitzvahs, and wake needs. You name it, I do it all.
How did you become involved in today's case?
I was hired by Harper Martini, the owner of the estates, to throw a wedding for Casey Soto and his fiance, Mrs. Genesis Petrillo. Genesis, unfortunately, passed away at the close of the event, and I'm here to give my account.
Now, was this the first time you'd worked with Peony Estates?
No, for the past 5 years, I've hosted over 70 events at the Peony Estates. My event planning business and the estates have done well together. Their facilities and employees have always been top-notch, and they run a tight ship. We work well together, and by the time of the wedding, Harper and I had developed a very close working relationship.
Now, how were you approached to plan Casey and Genesis's wedding?
Well, I was honored when Harper asked me to run her son's wedding. Harper even asked me to set up as much as I could without bothering the bride and groom. It seemed like it was just to keep them away from any stress, and honestly, I was just there to make their special day a bit more special.
Now, how did the planning process go?
Well, like I said, I've worked there a million times before, so aside from some special touches, it was quite a breeze. Though there was the usual tug of war between the in-laws, I always keep myself above the drama because the big day always comes first.
Taking you now to the days before the wedding, how did the rehearsal dinner go?
Well, during the night of the rehearsal, Harper and Genesis were still cooling off after what I could tell was a bit of a showdown, but everyone seemed to enjoy themselves at the dinner, and Harper gave this really kind and moving toast to Genesis. Any tension between them seemed to evaporate there and then.
What happened after that?
Well, Harper gave Genesis and her wedding party these gorgeous bottles of wine. It was really thoughtful, and it made everyone's night.
What happened after that?
Well, what always happens when I plan a party, tons of dancing and even more drinking.
Did you see what Genesis was doing at this time?
She was having a blast, yeah. I saw her pop open a bottle of wine and pour a few glasses for her and her friends. They were out there partying until at least midnight.
Now, how did that dinner end?
Yeah, at around 12-ish, I was on my way out. Most of the guests had turned in for the night, and I stopped by one of the cocktail stations to say goodnight to the bride, maybe sneak something for myself. You know how it is.
How'd your conversation with Genesis go?
Well, it was only a few people, Genesis and a few of her friends. One of them wasn't drinking much, but Genesis and Angel were not slowing down that night from what I saw. As a wedding planner, I tend to be pretty good at gauging these things, so believe me when I say that I thought they were going to have a pretty rough hangover.
Now, was that concerning to you?
I didn't envy their wake up the next morning, but I honestly wasn't worried at all. They were just having fun. Well, a lot of fun. I thought they should drink some water before bed. I said goodnight and I left for the night.
Now, what happened that next day?
Well, I got to the estates the next morning at around 6:30 to help get all the flowers and furniture in place. We call that beds and beds in the wedding schedule. Harper was also up and she seemed excited to get the show on the road. After we went to grab Casey and Genesis from their deluxe suite.
And how were they?
Well, Casey seemed all right, but Genesis and Angel were totally missing. I texted them both, and Harper and I spent the next hour looking for Genesis, hoping that everything was okay. Harper kind of assumed that Genesis was just hung over somewhere, and to be honest, that was my first thought as well, based on what I saw the night before.
When did you first heard what happened?
Yeah, we were in Casey and Genesis's suite when we learned that Genesis had been poisoned and fallen into a coma. God, everything was just such a blur. But I know that she died soon after. It was so terrible for us all, and everyone was just walking around in a daze that whole day.
What'd you do after that?
We sent everyone there for the wedding back. I remember going home and feeling just so terrible. It was a shame to see such a tragedy happen at the estates. I really valued everyone who worked there because they always did such great work keeping things clean and running smoothly.
Did you continue working with Peony Estates after Genesis's death?
I didn't. I wanted to give them distance. So I did everything that I could to help Casey and Harper grieve for Genesis because she was a part of their family.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
The defense may cross-examine the witness when ready.
You've worked with the defendant since 2015, correct?
Yes, I did.
And
They've
you've,
always been one of the best places to host my events.
and you've hosted 83 events at Peony Estates, right?
That's correct.
Throughout this time, you've developed a pretty solid relationship with Miss Martini.
Like I said, their place is one of the best to host events because they run things cleanly and on time. And it's been a great relationship for us both. We trust each other.
And you'd consider that relationship to be more than just professional, right?
I said we have a very close working relationship. We trust each other greatly.
You'd go as far to say that Miss Martini felt like family to you?
Yeah, in the sense that we were around each other a lot, argued a bit, and trust each other a lot. Absolutely.
You and Miss Martini had such a close relationship that she hired you to plan her son's wedding, right?
Like I said, it was a real honor.
But Miss Martini asked you to be silent about your involvement in the wedding planning process, correct?
Well, again, like I said, she asked me to keep as much of the stress and planning, logistics away from Casey and Genesis. Yeah.
Would you say, no, you'd agree that this request made you a little uncomfortable at first, right?
Yeah, I was confused at first because normally that's not how it rolls, but I absolutely consider doing a favor for Harper. Absolutely.
Miss Martini offered you compensation for your quietness, right?
She did, and right, it makes sense because I didn't have all of the opportunities to consult with the bride and groom to be. So a lot of that was just for my opinions on what I think that they'd like best.
She offered you a 15% higher rate than normal?
Yes, it was very kind, and considering the amount of work that we brought each other over the years, it was a very sweet gesture.
You'd agree that this type of compensation influenced your compliance with her request a little bit?
Objection, Your Honor, to the relevance of whether this witness is getting paid more makes any fact in whether Peony Estates ran a clean operation more or less likely.
Does the plaintiff wish to respond?
Your Honor, bias is always relevant.
Bias is always relevant. I think the additional compensation might tend towards bias. I'm going to allow the testimony.
I'd like to direct your attention to the night of June 7th, 2019. You witnessed Genesis receive the bottle of Cara wine that night, right?
Yes, like I said, Harper had made this really touching toast to Genesis, and everyone, I mean, it made everyone's night. It was really thoughtful.
You hadn't seen this bottle of wine before it was presented at the dinner, correct?
No, from what I could tell, it was one of their newer wines that they had made, yeah.
So you can't attest to whether this bottle was handled safely before it was given to Miss Petrillo?
Like I said, the Peony Estates, I've worked with them so closely because they've always run a tight ship. And I assumed, like I always do, that they handled it up with the utmost care.
Miss Petrillo, is that a yes or no to my question? You cannot attest to whether they handled the bottle safely before they gave it to Miss Petrillo?
No more than I can about the salad, but we have a close working relationship and they are a great business partner for a reason.
Moving on to after the rehearsal dinner. You encountered Genesis around midnight?
Yeah, like I said, I was on my way out of the party and she and a few friends were enjoying a few drinks at one of our cocktail bars.
So it was apparent that Genesis had clearly been drinking, correct?
Like I said, from what I saw at that cocktail bar, they were drinking quite a lot.
But you weren't worried about the amount of drinking that Genesis had been doing, right?
Right, like I said, I'm a pretty good gauge of these things. They were just having a lot of fun. They'd probably have a bit of a hangover. Nothing to worry about, though.
But you weren't too concerned about Genesis Petrillo's alcohol level, correct?
At that time?
At that time.
Like I said, it would be a pretty rough hangover and she wasn't slowing down from what I saw, so I can't really say.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Does the plaintiff wish to conduct a brief redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, you may proceed.
Mr. Osborne, why were you asked to keep your planning discreet?
Like I said, from what I could tell, it was to keep as much stress off of Casey and Genesis for their wedding day.
And why were you compensated more than usual?
it was a fee for the extra work that would be involved for me guessing at what I'd have to do instead of being able to consult the bride and groom. I was taking on the stress that they weren't. That's all.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Mr. Osborne, you were excused at this time. The defense may call their next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. At this point in time, the defense calls Mr. Austin Lewis to the stand.
You may proceed when ready.
Yes, Your Honor. Could you please state your name for the court, spelling the last?
Sure. My name is Austin Lewis, Lewis.
Could you please just tell us a little bit about yourself, Mr. Lewis?
Sure. Some people might call me a sommelier, and they would be correct. I actually know wine like it's the back of my hand. You give me a wine, I can tell you where it's from, what year, the pH levels, where the grapes were grown. I can tell you about the tannins in the soil. I actually currently work as the head winemaker at Peony Estates.
What are some of your responsibilities as the head winemaker?
Well, since Peony had opened, I've overseen our growing, harvesting, fermentation, aging, and bottling processes. While Harper is technically in charge and occasionally checks in on the wine process, I have a lot of autonomy in crafting our exquisite wines.
So as part of your responsibilities, are you also in charge of pesticide use at Peony Estates?
Yeah, and actually Peony is located above a swamp, so while our rich soil is very unique to the region, we often have problems with pests. These pests did indeed threaten our wine production, so to save our precious grapes, we decided to indeed start using pesticides, of which I personally oversaw all uses.
When did Peony Estates start using pesticides on their property?
Well, originally, like I said, we're located near a swamp, so this has been a problem for a while. And we originally started with some organic solutions, but it became clear pretty quickly that the organic solutions were just not that effective and they were a bit expensive. So in October of 2015, we switched to a chemical-based pesticide that we have been using ever since.
What steps did you take to ensure that the use of your pesticide was safe?
Well, at first I was concerned because we're losing our brand, right, as an organic winery. So it was my first priority to ensure that switching away from organic pesticides was going to be safe for all of our customers, wines, and staff, right? That was my first priority. So I provided all of our employees with mandatory annual safety training on the proper use and storage of pesticides.
Could you elaborate a little bit more about these training sessions?
Yeah, of course. So for example, one thing that we did was make sure that everybody knew that each time they handled pesticides, it was required that they change into fresh clothes and they thoroughly wash
Objection,
their
Your Honor,
hands.
hearsay, if I may be heard.
You may.
This witness is going into how he taught the employees, which means that there was some kind of testimony or speech involved indirectly, where he taught them about the safety procedures, and therefore this is hearsay, which is it's being used to show that the employees were aware of the safety procedures.
Response?
Your Honor, I would argue that my witness's statements are merely going to show, again, just the subsequent action of his own actions, and we're not delving into the mindset of whether or not people actually knew these specific things. Rather, he's just testifying to his own actions and the steps that he took, and not talking about any hearsay statements specifically, Your Honor.
If I may be briefly heard.
Yeah, briefly.
I don't believe that they're going to show what the subsequent actions are. No proof has been laid for what those actions are. Moreover, again, he is testifying to his own statements, and as previously established, that's still hearsay as to what he said.
I do agree that he's testifying to his own statements. However, I don't believe that this falls under the definition of hearsay, that they're trying to prove the truth of the statement. I think that this is more towards the effect on the listener and how they were trained. So I'm gonna allow the testimony.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Lewis, would you be able to continue, or do you need me to re-ask the question?
Yeah, why don't you re-ask the question, please?
Sure. Can you just elaborate a bit more on the training sessions?
Oh, right. So yeah, so for example, like I was saying, one of the things that we made sure they all knew they had to do was that when they handled pesticides, they had to change their clothes and wash their hands thoroughly before returning to any of the wine production or wine related work.
Did you take any additional steps?
Yeah, starting in about 2016, I started to rope off parts of our vineyard at the bottom of our slope that actually had the worst drainage.
Objection, Your Honor. I'd like to re-raise my previous objection to hearsay, if it may be heard.
You may.
There was no testimony revealed later on as to the subsequent action of the listener. He merely ended on what his statements were and did not reveal later on as to what any actions he took based off his own statements. Therefore, I'd like those statements to be stricken from the record.
So it's not offering the truth of anything in that statement. He's saying that he taught them. Truth
Your Honor,
of
if it may be heard. I believe that not only did he say that he taught them, he also went into specifics of what he taught them with certain safety practices, and that he taught them is incredibly important to the case at hand. I believe that they're trying to use this for the truth of the matter, that the employees were taught these specific matters.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna overrule the objection.
Mr. Lewis, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I think it was about taking additional steps, correct? Right.
Yes.
So yeah, so like I was saying, in the beginning of 2016, I started to rope off the portions at the bottom of our slope that had the worst drainage. In August of each year, I made sure that all of the grapes from these roped off areas were actually thrown out and were not used to make any of our wines.
Okay. So how were things at the winery during the 2018 harvest period?
Yeah, the 2018 harvest was pretty difficult. In June of that year, we actually developed a pretty bad infestation in the wine cave and bottling area. After about a month of our best organic efforts, we finally kind of threw in the towel and we're preparing to spray the cave with the chemical pesticides. Unfortunately, as we were kind of in the process of doing that, that was the exact day that a health inspector returned to Paoni and cited us for storing these pesticides in a nearby shed, even though we were, kind of in the process of using them and planning on using them later that day.
How did you end up conducting the spraying of the wine cave?
Sure. So after the inspection, right, we removed all the casks from the wine cave as required by the health and safety codes. We then sprayed the cave, waited the appropriate 48 hours before returning all of the casks. And then we actually built a new pesticide storage shed about 600 feet from all of our production facilities so that we would be in line with the health codes.
So when was the last time that Peony Estates sprayed pesticides before the wedding, the scheduled wedding of Genesis Petrillo and Casey Soto?
It was about several days before the actual wedding. We did a bit of spraying, and then we actually threw out a lot of extra pesticide just as a precaution. We actually ended up throwing out some of the wine that was around these pesticides at the same time as well.
Now, were you ever aware that any of the wine produced by Peony Estates was ever contaminated by pesticides?
No, I personally actually supervised all of the sprayings that we did, like I said, to ensure that they were done safely and correctly. In fact, I actually know that the DHS tested a random sample of 20 of our wines in 2018, and they didn't find any unsafe pesticides in any of them. And I read that in a report.
Would you recognize that report if I were to show it to you today?
Yeah, I believe so.
Your Honor, permission to share my screen and present Exhibit 9.
You may.
Is everyone able to see that?
Yes.
Roger. Mr. Lewis, do you recognize this? Well, what is this report?
This is the report about the 20 wines that were tested from Paoni Estates.
And what does this report say, essentially?
So of the 20 wines that were tested, none of them actually were found to be in any level of pesticide that was considered unsafe. They were all—
Objection, Your Honor, facts not in evidence, if I may be heard.
You may.
This exhibit has not been entered into evidence and admitted by you as the judge. Therefore, I believe that the witness is testifying to facts that are not yet in evidence.
Your Honor, if I may, pertinent to stipulation 3, exhibits 1 through 10 are already pre-admitted. So in fact, this exhibit being exhibit number 9 is actually already in evidence. It is stipulation 3.
Stipulation 3. Okay.
Mistake, Your Honor. I withdraw my objection.
Okay. You may proceed.
So just again, Mr. Lewis, what exactly does this report say?
Right. Like I said, so they tested 20 of our wines, and all of the contaminant levels sampled of these wines, they were identical. None of the wines tested by the DHS actually contained an unsafe level of pesticides.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Lewis. At this point, I'm stopping the screen share. I apologize. Take me a minute. Get that out. Okay. So just to be clear, Mr. Lewis, when would these wines that were harvested and tested in 2018 be sold by Peony Estates?
Yeah, so our wine turnover is just 1 year. So all of the 2019 wines that we market and sell are made from the 2018 grapes.
Thank you. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
The plaintiff may cross-examine when ready.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Lewis.
Hey, good morning.
I'd like to talk about your relationship with Mr. Francasio. Your family used to work for him, right?
Yes, my mom used to work for him, actually. She actually taught him a lot of what he knows about winemaking.
And you believe that during that time, Mr. Francasio mistreated your family, yes?
Yeah, he was a pretty bad boss, for sure. And he was pretty bad at making wine, too. Like I said, my mom did most of the work in teaching him how to actually make wine. He pretty regularly would mess up a lot of batches.
Now, you also believe that you also blame Mr. Francasio for your mother's death, right?
Yes, in a sense.
Objection, Your Honor, to relevance.
Your Honor, if I may be heard.
You may.
As previously established in the case, Mr. Francasio is a direct competitor of Peony Estates, which Austin Lewis is an employee of. If he blames Mr. Francasio for his mother's death, it goes to his bias, which is always relevant.
Your Honor, if I may.
You may.
Danny Francasio is not a named party in today's case, and whether or not the personal relationship between Austin Lewis and Danny Francasio makes no fact in today's case more or less likely whether or not Peony Estates' own health and safety practices were adequate under Midland's law.
Your Honor, if I may be heard.
Yeah, if you can just, I guess, walk me through how his bias towards Francasio bears on the facts in this case.
Yes, Your Honor. Because Francasio is the one who initiated this tip, it is important to establish that there is bias against Mr. Francasio in this case, as him leaving Peony Estates would also it would also benefit him to not only win this case, as he has an investment in this particular winery estate, but also to throw dirt on Mr. Francasio, whose testimony has been previously elicited.
Your Honor, if I may, again, this witness has been constructively sequestered. They have not heard any of Danny Francasio's testimony. The opposing counsel has laid no foundation that they even know that Danny Francasio was initiating any of these complaints about Peony Estates. And especially for those reasons, I feel like there is no foundation that's been provided by opposing counsel that any of this testimony is in any way relevant to proving that any of the facts at issue in today's case would be made more or less likely.
If I may briefly heard.
Yeah, one final brief response.
Yes, Your Honor. I'm not asking that the witness be aware of what Francasio said. I'm saying that when Francasio's statements and this witness statements are taken in conjunction, they're biased against each other as opposing wineries is important to their testimony.
I will allow you to question him on the bias. I think, but I'll ask that you keep it brief. Okay.
Yes, Your Honor.
I will allow that question.
Yes, Your Honor. And Ms. Martini gave you a way out of Francasio's winery with a job, yes?
Can you repeat that one more time, Counselor? Sorry.
Yes, Ms. Martini gave you a way out of Francasio's winery with a job offer, right?
Oh, yeah. In 2015, Harper Martini came along and gave me an opportunity to actually have a lot more influence over the wine growing process, which was, a dream for me. So of course, yeah, it was a great opportunity.
And being Harper, Miss Martini would make you two his competitors, right?
I mean, by nature of the business, yeah, of course.
Moreover, if PD Estates loses this lawsuit, you're out of a job.
I mean, I'm pretty good at making wine, so I'm sure I could find another job, but I would indeed lose my job with Peony, of course.
And you also own 10% equity in PD Estates, yes?
Yeah, I do.
So if you lost this case, that investment goes away.
Yeah, it does. But like I said, I'm pretty good at making wine, so I'm fairly confident in my ability to find another job if that were to happen.
I'd like to direct your attention to the practices of the PD Estates winery. You used to use organic pesticides, right?
Yeah, that's right.
But you made the switch to conventional chemical pesticides in 2018?
Yes, yeah.
Miss Martini had been pushing for their use way back since 2015, right?
Right. And, originally I actually had no problems using these chemical pesticides around the buildings. I just feared with the actual crops themselves, like the grapes, I wanted to keep those with the organic pesticides. But after a while, it just became too difficult to maintain.
But your advice to actually use them with the grapes and in the cellar was not to use chemical pesticides, yes?
Right. Like I said, I think we should try to stick with organic, but after a while, it just became too difficult.
Now, all the wines in PD Estates only take a year to produce, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So all the grapes in the 2018 batch were the first that were actually exposed to chemical pesticides.
Yeah, I guess you could say it like that.
Is that a yes to my question?
Yeah, I suppose.
Which means that all the wines sold in 2019 would be the first wines with a chance of containing chemical pesticides, yes?
Yeah, that's right. But like I said earlier, these wines were all tested and all found to have all found to have safe levels of pesticides in them.
Mr. Lewis, is it your testimony today that all the wines at PD Estates were tested?
No, just those 20 in 2018. I think we talked about this earlier.
Right, so only a portion of the wines were tested, not all of them, right?
Yeah, that's right. But they all had identical levels of pesticide.
I would like to talk about the PD Estates vineyard. You throw away some of the grapes each year, yes?
Yeah, like I said earlier, I rope off the grapes from the bottom portion of our hill that have the worst drainage and then throw those out every year. The grapes from the top of the hill are a little bit more, the soil is a little bit more fertile, and the grapes from the top of the hill produce better tasting wines anyways. So these larger grapes from the bottom, it really, when it comes to quality of wine, it's not that big of a deal to throw them out.
But in 2018, you weren't there to see that those grapes without adequate drainage were thrown out, were you?
Well, no, I mean, we had been doing this for years. You're right. In 2018, I did have a family emergency. So I was gone during the actual harvest in August. So I did not see them get thrown out myself, but I run a pretty tight ship, and I'm sure that one of my employees would have told me if they had not been thrown out. It would have been hard for the entire winery to keep that a secret from me.
Well, Mr. Lewis, none of the employees actually told you, right?
No, but like I said, it would have been pretty difficult for me to not find out.
Well, Mr. Lewis, you instructed Miss Martini to take care of this, right?
Yeah, right.
But even she didn't approach you, did she?
No, so I just assumed that it had been done in the way that we had been doing it for years prior.
Miss Martini never took care of this years prior, did she? It was your job.
Right, but that doesn't mean that she didn't know how to do it or that it was happening. And in addition, all the other employees, like I said, have been doing this for years. So I had really no reason to be concerned.
I'd like to talk about your pesticide storage. You received a health code violation in June of 2018, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And this was for having pesticides too close to the wine storage?
Yeah, like I said earlier, we were actually planning on spraying the cave that day. And so we had moved our pesticides to a nearby storage shed to be used within the next couple of hours. And when the inspector showed up, it honestly was just kind of unlucky. But yes, we were cited for that. And we then proceeded to build another storage shed farther away.
Yet despite this change of storage sheds, you were cited again in 2019 for pesticides being too close to the bottling area, right?
Which inspection are you referring to?
The one in 2019. The one I believe on May 9th.
There were several. Oh, in May 9th.
The first one.
Right. Yes. Yeah, we were, it's actually a pretty similar situation where we were in the process of actually doing the cleaning out as it happened, as it was happening is when we were inspected. Yes.
Which is exactly what you told them on the previous inspection.
Or which is exactly what had happened on the previous inspection.
Well, Mr. Lewis,
Well,
you
not
yourself
not exactly, but you know, it's similar idea, right?
But Mr. Lewis, you yourself admit that that's a pretty convenient excuse, right?
Yeah, and you know, that's pretty unfortunate, but to be honest, I'm just glad that we were able to rectify those situations moving forward, and that you know, ultimately we ended up coming to the right solution and getting the right thing done.
Mr. Lewis, you said on direct that you were aware of the toxicology reports given by Meta Labs, correct?
Yeah, the reports of our wines that were tested in 2018.
Do you remember making an affidavit?
Yes, sir.
And you were allowed to make changes to this affidavit up until the moment before trial, right?
Yes.
And is everything in this affidavit truthful to the best of your knowledge?
Would you mind showing me a copy of this affidavit?
Yes, Your Honor. Permission to post a picture of the Mr. Lewis's affidavit?
You may.
Co-counsel, if you could please scroll to the very last page.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The very last page of the affidavit.
Sorry, I'm going in the wrong direction. I apologize. There's a lot of pages, Counselor. I apologize. Can you give me the page number?
I believe that it is on page 8 of Mr. Lewis's affidavit. The entirety of the packet is not numbered.
I apologize for the time this is taking.
Right there. If you could scroll down just a bit.
There? Or?
Yes, right here.
Okay.
Now, Mr. Lewis, this is your affidavit, yes?
Yes.
Now, where here does it say that you're familiar with the content and meaning of the lab reports given by Mr. O'Keefe?
You're referring to Exhibit 9, right?
Yes, I am.
Yes, it says it's a lab analysis that the health inspector requested, and because I'm chief winemaker, I received a copy of the report, and on the same day that it was completed. Yeah.
But you are not an expert in toxicology, are you?
No, nor have I ever claimed to be.
Right. So you wouldn't have exactly any idea as to what that lab report meant, would you?
Well, I mean, it's like a graph. It's numbers. I mean, it's pretty easy to follow.
Right, but you can't testify as to exactly what the conclusions that from that lab report can be derived, can you?
I cannot testify to how exactly they came to those numbers and created that graph, but the graph is labeled properly, and you know, it's not. And I've spent my whole life around wine, so I do. While I can't, like I said, testify to their process, yeah, I can indeed tell you about what I'm looking at in front of me on this chart.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Does the defense wish to do a brief redirect?
Yes, briefly, Your Honor. Permission to bring up Exhibit 9.
You may.
Okay, is everyone able to see that? Okay, may I proceed?
Yes, you may.
Okay. Mr. Lewis, how are you able to tell that this chart says that all the levels of contaminants in the tested wine were in fact safe?
Well, so it's labeled, right? So you've got the reporting limit, which is the like the amount of this certain pesticide that they're talking about, or that's the limit for what is considered safe, and then you've got the result, which is the number that they actually tested, right? And so you can see that when you look at all these pesticides, all of the result numbers for Peony's wines were under the reporting limit for the amount of pesticides, which means that all of the wines that were tested in 2018 at Peony were contained a safe level of pesticides.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
Mr. Lewis, you are excused. The defense may call their last witness.
Thank you, Your Honor.
At this time, the defense calls Dr. Cannon to the stand.
Dr. Cannon, you have been pre-sworn. The defense may proceed when ready.
Please state your name and spell the last for the record.
My name is Dr. Roxanne Cannon, spelled C-A-N-N-O-N.
And what do you do for a living, Dr. Cannon?
I am an associate consultant at Gardner Consulting, Inc., which is based in California. And I am a medical doctor with expertise in the fields of toxicology and pharmacology. I'm hired to testify in both civil and criminal cases regarding these fields.
What qualifications do you have to hold this position?
I received my Bachelor of Science in Chemistry from The Ohio State University, and I received my medical doctorate with an emphasis in toxicology from Harvard Medical School. I have published multiple articles in the field and continue to be affiliated with many professional organizations surrounding my career.
And how do these qualifications apply to today's case?
I have expertise in the field of toxicology and pharmacology, which has allowed me to be able to examine this case closely. In fact, I was the chief toxicologist at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston, so I have witnessed several patients like Genesis Petrillo.
How did you become involved in today's case?
I was hired by Harper Martini's attorneys to assess the findings of Dr. Jimin Kwan in regards to the death of Genesis Petrillo.
And were you provided with sufficient facts and data to come to a conclusion?
Yes, all of the materials I received were more than sufficient.
What methods did you use to conduct your investigation?
I reviewed the documents and exhibits provided to me. Specifically, I used exhibits 5, 6, 7, 10, and 23 for my report. I also reviewed the report prepared by Dr. Kwan and the affidavit of Angel Rodriguez.
Are these methods standard in your field?
Yes, they are.
And did you apply them reliably?
Yes, I did.
So what conclusions did you come to?
I concluded that there were far too many flaws in the theory that Harper Martini's wine contained the pesticide that killed Genesis Petrillo. I offered up 4 other opinions on what could have actually been the cause of death.
And how did you come to that conclusion?
Well, I used my expertise in conjunction with extensively researching the documents provided to me. It is clear that Dr. Kwan rushed to judgment on the cause of Genesis Petrillo's death.
And was your conclusion reached to a degree of medical certainty?
Yes, all of my 4 conclusions were all reached to a degree of medical certainty. I take great pride in my work.
So, Dr. Cannon, I would just like to go through that. You mentioned 4 other alternatives to Dr. Kwan's theory, correct?
Yes, as I stated previously, I noticed many flaws in the theory that Dr. Kwan brought forth. I believe it is likely that Petrillo could have died from alcohol poisoning, an allergic reaction, hepatic disease, or that the pesticide was somehow ingested in another way. Although I only provided 4 alternatives in my report, there are many other possibilities that could explain Petrillo.
So can you walk me through the first conclusion you mentioned, alcohol poisoning?
Yes, well, first, I cannot rule out the possibility that Petrillo simply suffered from alcohol poisoning, which is what Dr. Kwan initially suspected.
And how did you form that conclusion?
There were several telltale symptoms, including nausea, vomiting, slurred speech, stomach pain, and slowed breathing. We do not know what Petrio's peak BAC was that night, and alcohol poisoning commonly leads to respiratory arrest, which was Petrio's cause of death.
Moving on, can you explain your next conclusion?
Yes, I believe that Petrio could have suffered from an allergic reaction. According to Angel Rodriguez, the wedding had a buffet and many other beverages that Miss Petrio could have consumed that night.
And how did you form that conclusion of an allergic reaction?
The medical evidence did not indicate that Petrio had any prior allergies, but there are instances where individuals develop allergies later in life. The medical understanding of allergies is constantly changing, and I cannot rule out that an allergic reaction could have potentially caused Petrio's respiratory arrest.
And now can you explain your third conclusion?
Well, hepatic disease, also known as chronic liver disease, can lead to liver failure and result in symptoms present in alcohol poisoning. I'm concerned that Petrio could have been undiagnosed.
How did you come to that conclusion?
While Petrio's medical records had no evidence of hepatic disease, this disease can occur at any point in life, and Petrio had not had regular blood work done. Her blood had not been tested in 3 years prior to June 8th, 2019. In that 3-year gap, Petrio could have potentially developed this disease.
And lastly, can you just explain your last conclusion?
Yes, there are other alternatives for how Petrio could have ingested this pesticide, which should have been considered more from the doctors treating her in the ER. The bottle of wine did test positive for pesticide, but there is no way to confirm that it was contaminated when Petrio consumed it.
And what results did you use to form this conclusion?
Well, Petrio's results showed isofenfos organophosphate pesticide in her blood, but there are many explanations that I considered for those results.
What other explanations did you consider?
So the stomach produces enzymes and mechanically churns to mix stomach contents. It is possible, but could be unlikely, that the pesticides entered by way of means through direct ingestion, other foods that were laced, or unwashed fruits and vegetables. While it is compelling that the wine contained pesticide, it is not conclusive.
Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yes, so just because a particular case, in this case, the wine seems likely, it does not mean that that this conclusion has been reached to a degree of scientific or medical certainty, or it's more likely than another alternative. I still have so many questions on the report of Dr.
Wrapping everything up, what is your conclusion on the cause of death of Genesis Petrio?
Look, my job is to point out the inconsistencies of Dr. Kwan's findings. As I have stated before, we may never know for sure what killed Petrio. There are simply too many unknowns and variables and flaws in this theory.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Cross-exam.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Dr. Cannon.
Good afternoon.
In drafting your report as to the cause of death of Genesis Petrio, you didn't have access to the body, did you?
No, I did not. It had been cremated before I could do any tests of any kind.
And because of your role in this case, you certainly were not an attending physician when Genesis Petrio presented to the ER, correct?
No, I was not.
So, in fact, your determinations are based not necessarily on evidence or samples which you personally collected, correct?
No.
So you pointed out very aptly, thank you, 3 other causes of death for Ms. Petrio other than pesticide poisoning. One of them was alcohol poisoning.
Yes, alcohol poisoning was an alternative.
And what is the normal range of the blood alcohol level that is lethal?
In my personal experience, the highest BAC that I've seen resulting in a fatality is 0.3%.
And is it correct that Dr. Kwan's report, which you evaluated yourself, Ms. Petrio's alcohol level was at 0.16%?
Yes, that is correct. But the issue with that is We do not know what Petrio's peak BAC was that night. Typically, your BAC spikes directly after ingesting alcohol. And because her BAC was not tested until she got to the ER, we don't know when during the night how high her BAC could have been.
But you don't necessarily know when she started and or stopped drinking, do you?
No, I do not.
Okay. And as far as alcohol poisoning, 0.16, the documented level of Ms. Petrio's alcohol level is half of the normal lethal count. Isn't that
Yes,
correct?
it is half. But like I said, it wasn't tested until she had gone to the ER later in the night.
Does a diagnosis of alcohol poisoning offer any answer as to how organophosphate was found in Ms. Petrio's stomach?
I stated in my own report that that doesn't exactly line up with this alternative, but there are symptoms of alcohol poisoning that Petrio suffered from, and I cannot provide an explanation as to how the pesticide was found in her system, but I do know that alcohol poisoning could have potentially been a cause of death, although highly unlikely.
Highly unlikely because it doesn't explain all of her symptoms, right?
It does not explain all of her symptoms, but that doesn't mean it couldn't have led to her death.
Okay, would alcohol poisoning cause contracted pupils?
No, it does not, and I did note that in my report as well.
Nor would it cause constricted blood vessels, right?
No, it does not, but there were other symptoms that Petrio suffered from that do line up with alcohol poisoning.
Moving on to your guess that perhaps it was allergies, was there any rash noted on Ms. Petrio's medical record that you reviewed?
No, I noted that there was no rash and no inflammation, which Dr. Kwan also noted of. But like I said, it is still possible that maybe this allergic reaction could have been something that Petrio suffered from later in life. Like I said, unlikely, but still a possibility.
Would an allergic reaction cause contracted pupils?
No, it would not.
Would an allergic reaction cause constricted blood vessels?
No, but it does lead to respiratory arrest, which Petrio did suffer from.
Your Honor, that is time.
I apologize, Ms. Skura, but I believe we need to move to closing statements then, if that's time.
I would also like to remind everyone that at 12:57 Eastern and 11:57 Central Time, we're reaching all loss time, so our ballot should be submitted within that time frame.
Okay. I apologize that this trial has run a little bit longer. I guess if we can keep closing statements maybe a little bit shorter. I guess, I'm sorry, I haven't done a lot of undergrad mock trial stuff. What is protocol here? Do we want to try and get these closing statements out?
Yeah, usually we have a recess, but I think we should just skip straight to closings. Yeah.
Okay. That's on me. If you guys can just, I guess, maybe keep it 6 minutes each, I think we can get the ballot in time and it'll be fine.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
May I inquire as to how much time is left for plaintiff for closings?
Plaintiff closing has 6 minutes and 30 seconds, and defense closing has 7 minutes and 23 seconds per plaintiff timer.
Thank you.
Yeah, you may proceed.
May it please the court. Another year, another inspection, another excuse. Members of the jury, Your Honor, opposing counsel, we are here today because an innocent person was killed. But what killed her wasn't malice or a psychotic attack. No, what killed her was an accident, a preventable mistake that happened that would have never happened but for the defendant negligently making excuses instead of amends for their failures. Now, they've tried again here today to make more excuses. They've cobbled together a convenient story to hide their client, P&E Estates, from liability. But we, the plaintiff, have placed the truth plainly before you, that P&E Estates is liable for negligence per se. As the plaintiff in today's case, we bear the burden of proof. By preponderance of the evidence, we must show that P&E Estates was liable and that her liability is more likely than not to be true. It means that after looking at all the evidence of today's case, after looking at all the facts and listening to all the testimony, if you think that it is more likely than not that Peony Estates is culpable for what happened to Ms. Petrillo, you must find them liable. Now, today, we are pursuing negligence per se, and the law requires us to prove three things. One, that the defendant violated Safety Statute 12100, that the defendant's actions or omissions cause a type of harm that the statute was intended to prevent, and that the defendant's breach of the statute was the direct and proximate cause of the plaintiff's harm. Now, if you remember, direct and proximate cause, that was a phrase that my co-counsel, Ms. Johnson, asked you to remember at the beginning of today's trial. And through our testimony that we've elicited and through the evidence that's been admitted, we've proven just that. That but for Peony Estates keeping toxic pesticides near their wine, Genesis Petrillo would still be here with us today. Now, all the facts are laid bare before you, and the truth that they tell is crystal clear. In 2014, after poaching half of Mr. Francasio's staff and setting up her own winery, Ms. Martini and her new Peony Estate seemed confident about their prospects in the competitive Midlands winery market. However, from the get-go, cracks began to appear. We heard that on the first year, on the first inspection, that Inspector O'Keefe found pesticides too close to the winery area. Of course, Ms. Martini simply gave him an excuse. On the second year, Mr. Francasio heard frantic emails from Ms. Martini about how she didn't know how to deal with the pest problem on her premises, which concerned him because she should have had the experience. One would think that after working as a cellar hand and after receiving the warning from Mr. O'Keefe that PD Estates would clean up their act and know how to store pesticides, but you'd be wrong. Because again, in 2018, they received another citation. And at the same time, investigator Lonnie Paris, contracted by Mr. Francasio, out of fear for the public for what would happen if PD Estates didn't go unchecked, she found the same issues. Pesticides littered everywhere and too close to the bottling area. And in 2019, Mr. Francasio returned for another inspection. He was told by Ms. Martini that all the pesticides were safely located in one storage, that there was nothing wrong, that they were falling in compliance with all the regulations, but he found 4 major health code violations. We heard from Mr. O'Keefe today that all of these violations were pertinent to pesticides being too close to the bottling area. He found a half-empty can of pesticide right next to a bottle of Cara wine, the same thing that Ms. Paris said that she saw nearly a month apart. That bottle hadn't moved. It was sitting next to pesticides for so long, and that same bottle was given to Genesis Petrillo on the day of her wedding. On the next day, Genesis Petrillo fell into a coma and died of pesticide poisoning. Now, another year, another inspection had passed. And now, after you make another inspection of the facts, members of the jury, I ask that you prevent them from making another excuse, that you find them liable for what they have done, and that you find them liable for negligence per se. Thank you.
The defense may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Careful business owner, competitive business, convenient target. Ladies and gentlemen, the plaintiff just got up before you and tried to spin you a story, a fairy tale. Now they're here in court today to try and prove to you beyond a preponderance of the evidence that Peony Estates was the direct and proximate cause of Genesis Petrillo's death, pertinent to case law Nugent versus Peel in the Midlands Court Circuit. Unfortunately for the plaintiff, they were unable to make that claim effectively here in court today. You've seen through all of the evidence that the real victim here, Peony Estates. Now, let's walk through some of the evidence that opposing counsel attempted to provide in today's case. The first witness that they called is Danny Francasio, the direct competitor of Peony Estates. Now, opposing counsel just got up before you and tried to tell you about all of these emails that supposedly showed the guilt of Peony Estates. Ladies and gentlemen, you never saw any emails. There were never any emails entered into evidence today in court. All you heard is the direct competitor of Peony Estates speculating and coming up out of thin air that he had some reason to suspect that Peony Estates was doing something wrong. But there was no evidence that anything like that was occurring. He just suspected health code violations for some reason and decided to blame Peony Estates. Ladies and gentlemen, this is because Peony Estates, as the direct competitor of Danny Francasio, is a convenient target. His testimony is so biased, you can't count on what he's trying to say to you is true. But he also told you that he told Lonnie Paris to investigate this. Lonnie Paris admits they themselves thought that the tip was biased. And Lonnie Paris themselves is extremely biased in today's case. They told you that at this moment, they have a job that is predicated, that they said is predicated on them drumming up support for their story in their testimony in today's case. They told you in their direct examination, and when they started their investigation into Peony Estates, that they, quote, were just looking for any story that might help them make some money. Ladies and gentlemen, Lonnie Paris isn't in it for the goodwill of their heart or to protect consumers. They're in it to make money. And they told you that even after illegally breaking into inaccessible parts of Peony Estates, all they found was a memo stating that they used pesticides. They saw some pesticides, but they never saw any of them being used, nor inquired into the use practices by any employee of Peony Estates. So despite all of their own investigation, they never found that Peony Estates did anything wrong. And finally, they called Inspector Riley Atkins O'Keefe. And what did they tell you? That the vast majority of the operation at Peony Estates was completely solid with no health concerns. They told you that they never once considered to ask any of the employees about the nature of the pesticide storage at Peony Estates and whether any of the pesticide locations that they found were possibly being used for other pesticide sprayings, as Mr. Lewis later testified to. He also told you that, and I quote, in order to remain in business, a winery must comply with everything, according to the FDA, in order to make it so that they can operate. Ladies and gentlemen, Riley Atkins O'Keefe never prevented Peony Estates from operating and never ordered them to shut down. That's because they were following the rules. And he also confirmed with you that these 2018 grapes that he tested all contained safe levels of contaminants. And that was the wine that the plaintiff is alleging actually poisoned Ms. Petrillo. But in fact, we know it was tested and it did not contain an unsafe level of contaminants. Now, in today's case, we, the defense, have proven to you beyond a preponderance of the evidence that it is in fact Peony Estates that is a victim here. We've provided, through our own witness testimony of Mr. Austin Lewis, about the safe practices that were engaged in at Peony Estates to ensure that all of their winemaking production was safe and abided by the law. Blair Osborne confirmed this by saying that his working relationship with Peony Estates was such that he would never expect any unprofessional behavior, and he himself never saw anything that would bring him any concern. Multiple people who were actually at Peony Estates telling you things were going the right way. Again, Mr. Lewis confirmed the safety of the employment of all pesticides, the training of all employees in the use of pesticides, and generally the fact that they knew what they were doing. And Dr. Cannon finally came before you and told you that it's completely possible that Genesis Petrillo didn't even die from pesticide poisoning in the first place. You heard multiple witnesses, such as Blair Osborne, testify that Genesis Petrillo was drinking excessively the night of her death, and that alcohol poisoning could be another logical conclusion for her death, as well as potential blood disease or even pesticide poisoning from another source. The reality is, ladies and gentlemen, that the plaintiff in today's case has failed to meet their burden of proof, a burden that never once shifts to the defense. It is the duty of the plaintiff to prove to you that specific breaches of code by Peony Estates were the direct and proximate cause of Genesis Petrillo's death, despite having no one testify to any unsafe pesticide use ever in today's trial. Ladies and gentlemen, that's because they cannot meet their burden of proof. We have shown that there is no way for a plaintiff to prove by a preponderance of the evidence that Peony Estates actually violated the law and was a direct and proximate cause of Genesis Petrillo's death. Rather, the reason we are here is because Peony Estates was a convenient target. It's an investigation instigated by her competitors and folks who had something personal to gain. Ladies and gentlemen, again, the plaintiff cannot meet their burden. Peony Estates is a convenient target. Please find the defense. Thank you.
All right. Great job, everybody. I know that we hit our time. I have submitted my ballot in time. There was a lot of good stuff in this trial. I don't know if we are supposed to do feedback now or if that's something y'all want. I guess you guys can let me know. I know you guys are probably tired and need a break before your next round.
I have general comments. Sorry, hi, scoring judge. I have general comments if the participants would like them.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Really good round, y'all. I know that this was probably your first time doing Zoom, by the way. Also, are you guys okay if Blake and I make introductions, like who we are, why we are potentially qualified to be judging you today?
Of course, yeah.
Also, if y'all want to turn on your cameras, I'd like to see your faces. So when I talk to you, cool. So hi, my name is Emma Carter. I competed in mock trial in undergrad at Furman University. I now attend Wake to get my master's degree in interpreting and translation studies for Spanish. And I'm helping with Wake mock trial. But I was preliminarily a witness in undergrad, so that is like my area of expertise. I'm familiar with attorneying stuff, so I do have some good comments on y'all's comment sheet regardless, but general things really quickly. Keeping genders straight. That is one of my biggest pet peeves in mock trial. I don't know if you want to write them down and have a note card at counsel table or on the witness stand with you, but just make sure that when you are in captain's meeting and you get those genders of the witnesses that you keep them right, because it like a bell goes off in my head every time. So that's just something for me as a judge. One of my other pet peeves too, I promise I'll give you good stuff too. I'm just getting the nitpicky stuff out of the way. Genesises, that just sounds really crazy to me. So if you guys might, as a witness or an attorney, it can trip you up. So rephrasing your sentences to get genesises, the possessive of Genesis out of the way, that'd be awesome too. I couldn't tell if some of you were using notes. I know it's hard on Zoom to keep your focus on the camera the whole time, but it looked like some of you may have been, and we really, really should not be using notes. So I put that in some of the comments. I didn't let it affect your score, but I just let you know that that's something that I couldn't tell was happening. So next round, next tournament, you guys are aware of that and try to come up with tactics to not make it look like you're using notes. Zoom environment too. You guys probably want to be picking places that don't have background noises, that don't have other things going on, distractions, stuff like that. And then just kind of for me, because I love witnesses, like I said, that was my thing. Noah, is that your name? Love it. Great. All the way down to courtroom attire. I love the character. I love the personality. The only thing that would have made it better for me was I feel like you could have worn a turtleneck, and that's being me just being stupid. I feel like the turtleneck under the courtroom jacket would have been great. But yes, that was the highlight of the round for me. I have way more specific comments on my sheet, so hopefully those will be sent to you either end of the tournament. I don't know how we're doing it, but great job overall, y'all. Great round.
Hey guys, my name is Blake. I am a 3L at Wake Law. I'm on the national trial team here. I've won a few things, but y'all don't care about that. But you guys, great job, everybody. I didn't do mock trial in undergrad, so I was very impressed with. There were some very good moments during this trial. Just some general things. When the witness, it happened a couple times, but when the witness is giving you an answer you don't cut them off in the middle. I just think it's a bad look, and a jury is gonna assume you're the bad guy for cutting them off. Let's see what else. I have some pretty specific stuff that I guess I will try to submit through the written area. On the witness stuff, sometimes just say less. A couple witnesses had a few things slip out. I'm trying not to pick on anybody, but Lonnie Paris said, anything, I'll do anything for a buck or whatever. I think that answer, I was like, oh. And then somebody else, one of the expert witnesses said a lot of stuff was unlikely, even though it was part of her testimony. which doesn't help. But some of you guys also, when the witness defense opening attorney, I'm sorry, I can't see what your name is, but you did a great job of when a witness was trying to squirm out of an answer of, going back and is that a yes, just kind of making them commit to giving a yes or no. That's always a good thing, and y'all shouldn't be afraid to do that. Also, I know I was making some crazy rulings on some of those objections, but you guys did a good job of adapting and kind of finding a way to still get that testimony that you wanted. So I thought that was good. Being adaptable is a big part of this. And very, very strong round. Great job, everybody. If you have any questions, I guess you can just ask me or Emma or reach out afterwards, but good stuff.
Also, now that ballots are submitted, what universities or colleges are you guys from?
We're from UW-Madison.
And that's defense?
Yeah, the defense. Yeah.
Awesome. And plaintiff?
We're from Baylor.
We're from Baylor University.
Cool. Oh my gosh. I don't think I ever competed against either of you guys in college. That's cool. Cool. But yeah, if you have questions, Blake and I maybe can stick around for a second. If not, lunch.
Yeah. Cool.
No questions here, but I just wanted to say congratulations and job well done to the plaintiff. Pleasure competing against you, even in this weird format. But it's been fun.
Same to you, man. It was a pleasure. Yeah.
It was a good first round for Zoom.
What? How did you get that clapping emoji there? What?
So do we just kind of move on now and then kind of free to go until our next round?
Yeah, next round starts at 2:15. So
it was moved back 15 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. So just our group, we'll talk to you guys in a minute. We'll probably hop on to another call. Like that, but.